Quite surprised it's not Marco. No, Marco asked me also, in the spirit of the international cooperation that is represented here, just to introduce this morning's session. And again, we'll have a bit of a plenary, and we'll have an opportunity for more review and thoughts on what we've seen here. I will say so far this has been extraordinary, and I really want to thank Marco and Isa for hosting all of us, and the diversity and the important topics here have been really terrific. But right now we'll move on to this morning's sessions on these new challenging topics as we look to the future, when we will have global spectroscopy, over the entire globe at a reasonable revisit rate. And we're in a wonderful time because there are these precursor missions, NMAP, PRISMA, DESIS, and others, maybe even EMIT. So with that, we'll let the morning session begin.
Thank you very much, Rob. So we have a very always tight schedule, but we will have, for this very important session, I think, on open challenges for level 3, level 4 global products, we will have half an hour of discussion time. We have also prepared some questions, so if every presenter keep the time, we will have the 30 minutes. So, and with this, I would like to start and invite Sean Serban to come to the stage. And, and Patrick Hostad, because they will do it together. That's what I heard yesterday.
Good to get going? Oh, what's this on? All set to go? Okay. All right, I'm going to start a presentation that for myself and Patrick today, looking at challenges associated with scaling up in space and time for the use of imaging spectroscopy data for global plant trait, biodiversity, and ecosystem function research. Okay, shoot, now I gotta speed up. Everyone in this room, I think we all agree that we understand the climate is changing, primarily due to anthropogenic input influences on the global carbon cycle. Burning of fossil fuels, resource extraction, ecosystem degradation, and biodiversity loss are all converging to potentially lead us into an unstable biosphere in the future. However, everyone in this room also, I think, would agree that imaging spectroscopy and spectroscopy data and all the new tools we have and resources available are ushering us into a new era to really understand the influence of climate change on ecosystems, the impacts to biodiversity, the ability to monitor and understand resiliency in these systems, and to understand change. We're all typically used to using our primary source of information through the spectral data or image cubes from imaging spectroscopy data that we use to study and monitor ecosystems and their responses to climate. However, there are still challenges associated with a lot of the things we want to study with imaging spectroscopy data, including ecosystem function and plant traits. We have a lot of different processes and characteristics of ecosystems we want to understand: their atmospheric properties, land-atmosphere interactions, plant physiology, their traits, how they vary over small and large scales, their fluxes, and we can use tools from surface point measurements, drones, airborne data, and of course satellite remote sensing to try to bridge those scales and understand processes at all levels of the ecosystem. And important, these days we have access to a lot more data than when I started my PhD at a range of scales to start to bridge these, make these connections and better understand how we can develop models to allow us to better monitor ecosystems. But there's still challenges remaining associated with getting from the surface of space and characterizing processes that we want to monitor globally. And there's, as we've discussed here and in the breakouts, there's still an urgent need to improve how we access and use data, accessibility, the metadata, interfacing with information, and improving our ability to develop algorithms that can work across instrumentation. And but we have access to new technologies that allow us to do this better than we have ever been in the past. But starting at the surface level, or at the point scale, one of the fundamental things we need to do for monitoring and measuring plant traits is to create workflows that allow us to get traits connected with spectra, allow us to then scale that and make maps of the things we want to measure across space and time. And we can develop pretty strict protocols to link spectra and traits that we can collect in the field using a range of approaches, and develop those models that allow us to predict functional characteristics of plants. And if we start to pool these resources together and develop databases of information that we can harvest to generate new algorithms that allow us to test cross biome, cross species, cross study team or study site models, we can start to develop algorithms that allow us to look at functional characteristics in their relationship to spectra across space and time, but also use these models to predict traits on unmeasured leaves to increase our sample size and better understand how ecosystems are responding to climate change. And we can do that by building open databases and developing open code that allow anyone to create new algorithms and develop new methodologies and test those in silico. And in addition to traditional plant traits that we think about, like nitrogen, leaf mass area, chlorophyll, water content, we can also develop databases that allow us to start to look at plant photosynthetic properties, things that tell us about how plants are functioning in response to short-term climate perturbations, how they function and connect with, and how we can use this information to model and scale ecosystem fluxes, including leaf photosynthetic properties. So we've been developing a database, pulling together research teams, collections of paired leaf spectra and leaf gas exchange data to study just how well can we generalize these models and create predictive capacity to understand photosynthesis over in space and time. So the database is still evolving. You can contribute or check it out following that QR code to the GitHub. And we currently have quite a large number of data sets covering several key biomes and ecosystems, but of course we have those typical gaps in understanding from places that are hard to measure or reach, or where we need to reach out to more of our colleagues in different locations. And of course we can also, as we develop these methodologies, start to fill these gaps with imaging spectroscopy that we have access to now that covers almost the whole planet. And by developing methods that we've traditionally used in the past and pulling these data together and being careful in how we curate and combine these data sets together, develop standardized approaches for spectra and fitting procedures, we can create models that then allow us to predict those functional traits that we're really interested in, and understand how we can then scale these up to larger ecosystems through pixel to planet process methodologies. So moving up in scale and considering this idea of pulling together disparate data sets into a single resource that many researchers can access and use, we have a similar activity occurring within the SPG team to pull together airborne data paired with leaf traits and leaf spectra to allow us to then develop new algorithms and test those algorithms across different wavelengths, different instruments, simulate different characteristics of instrumentation and retrieval properties that allow us to then be ready to start to test as we move towards real data and SPG-like precursor data. There's a poster on this that you can check out for more detail. One example of doing that, again, there's a poster on this as well, so I won't spend too much time, but we can use this database, we can run it through different algorithm development methodologies and try to develop or explore the potential to develop instrument agnostic algorithms using new technologies and new statistical approaches. This is one example using a more Bayesian approach of the idea that once we developed posterior distributions on the wavelength coefficients, they're potentially very easy to translate to different instrument wave bands. It's a work in progress, and I think it's a prototype of a potential approach that we can develop and use together. And I think one of the key things with doing activities like this is that, and everyone in this room, it's all about cooperation. So the more we can pull data sets together and make them easily accessible, not even necessarily put them all in the same database, but allowing databases to work together, we can expand these techniques and capabilities to more instrumentation, more field sites. So I'm going to quickly speed up so I give Patrick enough time. I just wanted to make one more note on the challenges of scaling. A lot of ecosystems like the Arctic or drylands are also very heterogeneous. A lot of our pixels are going to be of pixel sizes that incorporate a lot of this heterogeneity within them. So one pitch for helping to bridge those scaling gaps would be to use more drone data We used various different drone platforms in the Arctic in the past as a way to go from surface to airborne data within the NASA above domain. And the cool thing about drone data, even with just basic RGB imagery and some other information, you can characterize pretty high, in very high resolution, species distributions of key plants and their functional traits on a landscape. And you can then also do what you would normally do on the field and put out point frame measurements or create plots, but you can effectively use plots within these high resolution data sets that fit within the pixels of the airborne data or the spaceborne data that you're trying to link to, and use that as new training information, which allows you to then scale up that functional information and their species distribution pretty effectively because you increase your sample size by a factor of 1,000. Maybe that's a little bit of an hyperbole, but you can substantially increase your input data to your training models, which makes these scaling approaches much more effective. And of course, we want to eventually get to the point where we can utilize airborne and spaceborne data to get us all the way up to the planet scale understanding. And I'm just showing here the PACE example, but it could be any of the simple systems that we've talked about this week.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Sean, also for introducing the, I would say, upscaling perspective that we have now going along with working with Nmap or Prisma data or emit data, and in the future we will have CHIME or SPG. So the scaling is quite clear, I think, that we have to take care of. What we also have to take care of, and I would like to make the point here, is the temporality of the data. So actually, when you refer to your PhD, if I may refer to my PhD, we just did a paper 2 years ago to show where I was wrong. And I'm proud of that, because it shows that in 20 years, science moves along the way, and what was probably potentially right 20 years ago, we know better today. And we are at this point now again, I would say, with hyperspectral data in the future. So I would like to take you to Namibia for a few minutes, where we just came back from a field campaign 2 weeks ago, where we were in the field for 3.5 weeks and looked at savanna ecosystems. And savanna ecosystems, if you look at the top left here, are very heterogeneous. This is half an Nmap pixel I'm showing here from drone data. And we are interested in separating between woody and herbaceous NPV and PV components. Why is this important? This is important because in southern African countries, we have real shrubification. So rangelands that are supporting local livelihoods in grazing systems, but also for wildlife, are deteriorating. Nobody knows exactly why, but it's ongoing. So there's a need to disentangle those components. And so far, we haven't done that. We haven't achieved it. And one reason for not achieving that is the top right hand. Yeah? So if you look at the seasonality and at the spectral, spatial heterogeneity of those regions, it's really difficult to do that. So let me show you how that looks like in Sentinel-2 feature space. And here, please concentrate on the green and on the blue. So that's the woody and the green component. I show an indicator of dryness and an indicator of greenness, if you wish, on the left-hand side. And you see how pixels that and I'll show you in a minute, how extracted from feature space behave over time. And on the right-hand side, you see how that basically pans out over the year. And it becomes rather clear that you're not happy with a snapshot of data. You need time series to disentangle that. And actually, time series is a great tool to work with that. So for me, the next step ahead in remote sensing with hyperspectral data clearly is getting the time series right. So what we can do, because we have those great time series now, for example, in Sentinel-2, we can look into phenometric feature space. So we can try to get a better grip on what's behind it, not just giving it agnostic to an AI and let it do the job, but understand why this is the case. So what we did here in this case is we looked at two phenometrics. One is the, say, base integral that you have, which vegetation is there during the dry season. And then we look at the rate of average falling. So what happens at the end of this quick decline with the herbaceous and the slower decline with the woody component. And then you can tap into this feature space and find your end members at the endpoints of that. So that's a great opportunity to identify, also from the data itself, we do ground measurements, of course, but from the data itself, you can extract thousands of potential end members. And then you can extract these components that you're interested in over time from your time series. Having said that, so we came up with a first result on Sentinel-2. This is a strip of about 600 kilometers extending through the rainfall gradient from Windhoek in central Namibia to the southern Angolan border. And you have the same colors here. So blue is herbaceous and green is woody. Red is the bare ground, could be soil, could be minerals. We have both here. And if you look at the zoom-ins that I provide here on this B on top, you see how beautifully it works. So we have a managed and unmanaged area left and right of this road, and you see perfectly well how woody and herbaceous vegetation differentiate. So we are quite happy with that, and we gave it to local stakeholders and experts, and they were quite happy with that as well. And if you look at the field perspective here, number 4, one of those that we show, you clearly see how the open soil and the woody and the herbaceous component nicely separate. Now, then local experts asked, oh, this is great. Give us the time series over the year. And I said, sorry, no, we don't have that. Simply because we had to integrate that into a yearly perspective for getting our multi-temporal end members. So Sentinel-2 is great, but Sentinel-2 has its limits, especially when it comes to separating soils and MPV. So I think it's great results, but there's great room for improvement, especially we don't have the time series yet. And this is, and you have seen that probably 2 days ago when Akpona showed our pre-processing scheme. This is what we developed with the California time series that we have. It's a time series where we have about 700 Nmap tiles over time since 2023 in 3 different sites. And most of those are, with few clouds, are cloud-free. So maybe it's 600 that you can use from those 700 that we have properly. And when you look into that in space, you see that you need to put it together somehow with the Landsat and Sentinel World. And that's the tiling scheme that we have shown already 2 days ago. So these data fit nicely to other data sets in the multispectral domain. That's the second thing I would like to mention here. Bringing together the synergies across missions and sensors is probably another thing we want to do and focus on, not just on getting the hyperspectral data right, but getting it right together with the multispectral archives that we have and that go back in time so nicely. So let me take you back to Namibia, and also there we have a great time series. It's about 30 observation shots that we have now with 600 kilometers of Nmap data. Again, it's the same area. It's just 30 kilometers wide now. It's the same area that I showed, the same gradient from Windhoek basically to the southern Angolan border. And it's a beautiful data set. There are clouds in there, of course, but most of the data is not very cloud prone. So we are really happy with that. And you see that it started in early 2023, and the last one was just a few weeks ago. So it works nicely, and we have that time series here available in Nmap data. So we have developed, or we have not developed, we have adopted a methodology to come from the cellulose absorption index, as well known, to NPV, which is a fractional cover that is in percent. We are not yet there that we differentiate what we did from Sentinel-2, but we are at the point where we start working on the time series of Nmap data. As I said, we are just back from the field 2 weeks ago. So don't please expect results, but the methodology is there. So we have the Nmap data sets, both from field measurements and from extracting data directly from the feature space. We have the synthetic unmixing methodology in place, where we can do synthetic mixtures in 10% steps, for example, and disentangle between the NPV, PV, and soil components here. We do a regression-based approach, so we will have a time series of NPV available soon. And then the next step will be learning from the Sentinel-2 live. How can we bring that into the woody and the herbaceous components? I'm pretty sure that we will be successful in separating this and now having steps over time, which would be great and exactly what is needed on the ground. Having said that, why is this important? And I like this quote because it basically shows what is still important today, even that this quote is from the 60s of the last century. It's 60 years ago that the Secretary of State kicked off the Landsat mission with that statement, basically. And today, it's still valid. It's more than that. It's overly valid, I would say, because we have two problems to solve. There's still the resource crisis. And we need, as I have hopefully shown, dense time series to disentangle what we are interested in. But on second hand, we have a climate crisis on top of that. And we need long time series. So we need to go together with the great archives that we have. So bringing together the hyperspectral and the multispectral world is imperative, in my opinion. Having said that, to wrap it up, Rob mentioned it in the beginning, we have that great future in front of us with sensors like CHIME and SPG giving us exactly that opportunity. And if you look at the swath that we will have then and the global coverage, it's exactly that. So we can do phenology-based studies based on SPG and CHIME wall to wall. So being prepared for that, I think, is one of the most important things that we have to do in our community these days. And I'm looking forward to improve on that over the next few years. And I guess Sean is giving the last. Come on, Sean.
Statement here over time, but we need to build a bigger community of users for hyperspectral data. We've talked about this in the breakouts. This includes folks from all walks of life, from our scientists to our public. In this case, we held a workshop that was extremely successful. We brought in travel communities to learn about using ecostress and emit data. They learned a lot, and there was a lot of interest in bringing back this information and tools back to their reservation to study resource management in their own communities. Just an example of what we could be doing with our.
Thank you very much. It's very, very nice talk. Thank you. Okay, so we move forward to the next talk from Katrin Wort from GFZ Potsdam. It's your floor.
Okay, good morning from my side. My name is Katrin Wort from GFZ Potsdam, and I will be speaking about space-borne multi-temporal hyperspectral mapping of soil properties for spatially more complete maps. Well, all of you know about the importance of our soils, since they also provide important ecosystem services to us, but they are also threatened by soil degradation, which is, for example, the reduction of soil organic carbon, but also soil erosion. And this, of course, has implications on climate change and food security. And therefore, there are many regulations and policies in order to improve the status of our soils. And some of them also mention remote sensing, and they mention research and monitoring of spatial and temporal changes of soils. Yeah, if we have a look at our existing maps, they include a large effort because they are based on point information, which means soil sampling campaigns. It's a very valuable effort, but it's also very expensive, and therefore these maps cannot be up to date. So they have a low temporal, but also a lower spatial resolution. Here I brought an example of a soil organic carbon map for Germany, which is also based on point information. So we have a rather coarse grid of 8 kilometers, and data between 2010 and 17 was used. There's also a later example that also used multispectral data, and this increased the temporal, the spatial, as well as the spatial accuracy. So in order to get ready for the upcoming spaceborne missions, we should also develop workflows and best use cases to use imaging spectroscopy. Today I would like to show two study cases. The first one is based in the Demmin site in Germany. This is a site with rather sandy soils, but we've got nice large fields which are ideal for remote sensing purposes. It's a rather flat to undulated terrain, and we have about 180 ground reference samples that we need to train our models and then also validate our models. We are interested in the SOC content on this site, and we have a short time series of 4 Prisma images which are cloud free. So clouds are a bit of an issue in this northern German side. So the other side is located in central Spain. It's the Camarena side. This is more a hilly area, so erosion is a big problem here. And we have about 70 ground reference samples. And here we are more interested in retrieving the iron oxide, calcium carbonates, and texture contents. Since it's located in central Spain, clouds are less of an issue. So we have a really nice time series of cloud-free images recorded between May 21 and August 24. In total, we have 29 Prisma images and 7 Nmap images, which you can see on the right-hand side. And yeah, you see that not always the full footprint of our site was covered. I aligned all these images and also aligned the pixel grids using the Erosix package. And since we're interested in soils, we need to remove the other land cover types, such as green vegetation, dry vegetation, but also moist soils. And as Patrick already said, it's only possible with hyperspectral data to distinguish between NPV and soils. So we really need imaging spectroscopy here. And what we do is we use a set of indices and thresholds, and then we remove the other land cover types. And then we get these bare soil maps. And as you can see, not all maps have the same coverage, and not all the fields are bare at the same date. So it's very beneficial to combine multiple images from multiple dates to have kind of bare soil composite. But the question is, how should we do this? So based on the German DMIN site, I developed 2 workflows. And the first one is just merging these, in this case, 4 images together to one synthetical image. And then I calibrated one model based on this image to get this, in this case, bare soil composite, but for the sock content. The second workflow is calibrating one model for each date. And then this model is applied to the corresponding image. So we get, in this case, 4 sock maps, and then they are merged in the end. Then we also provided an uncertainty map, which is based on all the values for each pixel that come out of a repeated random cross-validation, and then we take the standard deviation. So if we look at the results, we get nice results for this sock map. So you see the sock map in the top row. In the middle, you see the frequency of bare soils per pixel. And at the very bottom, you see the uncertainty map. So this was already published this year. And then for the Camarena side, it's still work in progress, but I can already show you a frequency map of bare soils. So of course, we've got more scenes, so we've got more bare soils per pixel, so higher frequencies. Yeah, so to conclude, there were actually 2 multi-temporal hyperspectral workflows developed on the German side in order to have spatially more complete maps. And we got high accuracies for the estimation of the sock content. For the Spanish side, it's interesting because we want to focus on other soil properties. And of course, we have a longer time series. And so we can answer other questions like how many dates do we actually need to have a spatially complete map? And also, how can the sensors and scenes be homogenized? That's also interesting. And this was all about mapping the status quo, always assuming that soils do not change so fast over time. But if we really want to map changes, which is required, we need longer time series and also what's very important, adequate ground reference data. So that's acquired in parallel to the hyperspectral spaceborne imagery in order to calibrate and validate our models. Yeah. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Katrin. The next speaker is, sorry. The next speaker is Dana. JPL, the floor is yours.
Oh, here it is. All right, thank you so much, everybody. I'm here to talk about kind of the overview of SPGVs were kind of level 3 algorithms that we're anticipating, and then also with a little bit of a vegetation focus. To kind of set the stage for some of the questions that we're hoping to discuss in the discussions portion of this section. So I'll try to move pretty quickly here. Knowing that these slides are going to be distributed, I'm kind of giving you a lot of information. We don't need to read all of this for time, of course, but just to remind folks that for SPG, we're looking at about a 30-meter resolution, about 16-day coverage, and we're covering a lot of different types of domains. And the data products that we're expecting to be in our level 3s are listed here kind of in the bottom 2/3. So focusing on snow and ice, geology and soils, terrestrial vegetation types, and then aquatic characteristics as well. And one of the questions was thinking about how do these products that we're anticipating contribute to a better understanding of the Earth system processes that we're interested in studying. And so this is a slide that Rob Green also showed, where these are kind of the questions that are laid out by the decadal survey put on by the US National Academy, and this is how we at least trace back to understanding of if the measurements that we're making are going to be related to the Earth observations that we're hoping to make in answering these important questions. So the way that we have thought about mapping this is through what we call a science and applications traceability matrix. And again, I'm not going to go through the details of these. These are both available online, and I'm going to flip through them really quickly for all the areas so that you have them for reference later. But this is kind of how we're mapping from these questions that have been defined by the science community to the observables that we actually want. And then, with target uncertainties, and then the types of applications that we anticipate being enabled by these different types of products. So this is aquatic products. If you have questions about these, you can see Kelly Lewis, who's here. Snow physics, we did have a nice talk from Nicholas Bond. Unfortunately, he had to depart this morning. Geology and soil products, so this is going to be leveraging heavily from EMIT, and Rob Green and Phil Broderick are working on these. And then terrestrial vegetation, which I'm going to kind of talk more in depth about here because I'm working on these products in collaboration with Christiana Ade, Sean Serban, Phil Townsend, many others in these groups. So just wanted to also introduce you to kind of the core algorithm workflow that we're anticipating for SPG. And so kind of everything in the L1B, L2A box over there we're, I think, ignoring for this session. But on this side, these are the kind of L3 products that we're expecting as kind of demonstration products that are going to be mapped globally. So to zoom in on the vegetation piece, we have an equivalent water thickness that we're expecting to produce, which is more from a Beer-Lambert absorption model is kind of what we're baselining. And then we have foliar traits, which we're baselining as a PLSR style. And one of the other questions that we're hoping to talk about is, are these algorithms ready for large-scale deployment? For the kind of temporal and spatial repeat that we're expecting from these missions. And just to be controversial, maybe not controversial in this group, we're not ready, right? So we had some really great talks talking about the fact that we need these to be applicable globally. We need them to be sub-seasonal. We need them to deal with mixed pixels. We ideally need them to use methods that will support SVG and CHIME being interchangeable to really help with that, the increasing temporal components. And ideally, we need a strategy for leveraging all kinds of different data collection activities that are going to help us to build out our data sets so that we can make these types of models globally representative. We need to do better with error propagation. We talked about this some yesterday, at least in the breakout I was in. And then, we need to be able to utilize airborne training data from lots of different sensors and then also start to leverage our spaceborne sensors. So this is just kind of an example. This is from a poster right over here, kind of summarizing the SVG vegetation activities that Christiana put together, which is lovely, and some of the questions that we're trying to exist. And we have a lot of data now that we can start to use to start to answer some of these questions. So I wanted to reference again this database effort that Sean mentioned, where we're trying to focus on thinking about how we can go from airborne data and ground data and try to gather as much of those kind of coincidentally collected data as we can from across different types of sensors that might have had different types of atmospheric correction, different types of processing, but we can start to bring those together in a way where we can start to really experiment with different types of algorithms and different types of strategies. And so this is a big group that's participating in this, and we're hoping that lots of other people will be interested in contributing to this. So we're going to be drafting this, putting this out for other people to use. This is going to be a public resource. So this is the figure that Sean showed, kind of highlighting this database. And one of the things that we've been thinking about here is that we don't just want reflectance data from airborne. We want to be sure that we're also collecting the radiance data and the OBS data so that we can actually move from the radiance data, at least, through the different atmospheric correction algorithms that are being baselined by CHIME and by SVG, potentially by others, and be able to generate models that support these different atmospheric correction strategies and can do resampling at the radiance level to then model out different sensor strategies. So I think that we will be. That's the key. We are not ready now, but we will be. And there's a lot of good reasons to think that. We're doing these types of efforts. There's discussions in rooms like this where we're starting to try to bring together all the different types of observations. We have really fantastic airborne precursors, and we have really fantastic global spectrometers now with increasingly global coverage. Of course, I'm on the emit team, so I got to show the emit coverage, which is growing all the time. And of course, with our European colleagues, we are kind of continuing to grow these databases and are going to be able to do some really incredible things. And then the last thing I want to say is that we learn by doing, right? So we weren't necessarily ready for this one at mid-launch, but we are now. And so, this is how we move forward, is by pushing ourselves. So I'm very thrilled to be here, and I'm really excited for what the coming years are going to bring. So thank you all.
Thank you very much, Dana. So I would like to ask the next speaker to come up. It's Javier Pacheco-Lapador, talking about a very important biodiversity topic.
Hello, everyone. So I'm going to talk about the biodiversity, plant diversity, and maybe from a bit of a critic point of view, but this is what I'm trying to help to solve. Yeah, I mean, we can use, or we are trying to use remote sensing to understand biodiversity. I think the most physically related the type of diversity with the remote sensing is actually functional diversity. We look at traits, and we look at the variability of these traits. And basically, this variability of traits also becomes a variability of the spectral signals we can capture from the sensors. So actually, we can use remote sensing to either to estimate those traits and then compute back the functional diversity, or even we can use directly also the spectral signals, and then we can also use it to estimate the diversity of the vegetation. And also with remote sensing, we can get information about the ecosystem functions. Therefore, we can use remote sensing to understand not only diversity, but also the functions, and try to understand better the connection between the functions and diversity. However, this requires developing new methods and face new challenges. Also, remote sensing offers us sampling capacity that we didn't have before, and this also brings new opportunities. But we need to understand a bit what we are doing in this case. Biodiversity studies may increase also the requirements for sampling, because we need to sample the diversity, not the average. So we need to sample more. We need to split the samples. And then we are trying methods in a very empirical way. So maybe we are suffering a bit of a survivorship bias. We find publications where people publish methods, metrics, and this works in this case. And there is something that looks like a lot like a diversity, which is also noise. So we are prone to get spurious results, for example, if we confound noise with diversity. So we need to understand a bit better what we are doing. I think we need benchmarks to try to test our methods and understand whether they should be working or not, and how often they should be working or not. And that's why I've been working in this scheme, which is I'm trying to develop an observing system simulation experiment, but dedicated to diversity, where with very simple models, this is not super sophisticated. I'm not trying to reproduce reality with a lot of fidelity, but I'm trying to provide a tool that helps to understand methods and to answer very simple questions, which I think sometimes we have given for granted, but actually are not demonstrated. So the idea is just to develop scenes that evolve over time. We have vegetation layer evolving over time, and we can simulate the vegetation traits, the remote sensing data, or the remote sensing imagery that will be associated to those traits. And then we can apply different methods to retrieve the traits and to use different remote sensing data, let's say variables, to understand all these questions and try to develop or to test our methods, basically. For example, in this case, I've been using actually a package I developed in the past, which is quite convenient for hyperspectral remote sensing, because the diversity metrics, actually, the value changes with the number of variables we are putting into the metric. So with hyperspectral data, we have a lot of variables, so we can put together a lot of variables, and therefore this makes things not comparable. So for example, we developed this package that normalizes the metrics, and this package is plugged to the bosses, so it can be actually used for testing. But any other package can be plugged. That's the point. The idea is that people can bring their own package and test. So this is just an example of the scenes and the kind of data that is produced. We have species maps, we have plant functional type maps. Then from there, we can also have the traits. We also have spectral reflectance, hyperspectral, but we can convolve to any sensor we want. We also have estimates of the different plant traits with more or less uncertainty. The idea is not to test methods to estimate traits. That could be also done, but I mean, this is all simulations, but to understand to what extent this uncertainty actually propagates to the estimation of biodiversity. And also we are simulating fluorescence, for example, and land surface temperature, because another question we want to test here is to what extent these other sources of information can be actually helpful to characterize functional diversity. Of course, one of the main problems we have in this case is spatial resolution. We know maybe it's the main, to me, I would say, I think it's the main problem to actually characterize a diversity that is comparable, for example, with ecologists will sample in the field. So of course, we can degrade the spatial resolution to test to what extent different methods are robust to this or not, or to what extent, for example, trying to pan-sharpen, for example, hyperspectral imagery with multispectral imagery would allow us to better estimate functional diversity. And as I say, we represent time series, so we have we can represent the different phenologies for different plant functional types and different species, so we can also get this variability. And of course, this translates in the imagery, you know, so we can have different species evolving at different speeds, so reacting differently to environment. So here also there is a connection between the response of vegetation to environment, and we can try to use this to understand a bit the connections with function. And actually, we also can simulate the different functions, particularly the fluxes. So we can try to also later on to develop to see to what extent the diversity we simulate relates with the ecosystem functions, and to what extent different remote sensing approaches can actually capture those relationships and understand where they fail and where they succeed. So I mean, this is a tool. It's simple. I'm not trying to reproduce reality, just answer very simple questions. But the idea is to publish it in an open source journal, to publish the code and allow people to use it, to improve it, and of course to give any feedback if you want. Everything is developed in Python, and yeah, I hope it's useful in the future. Yeah, and there were some questions that I were asked to answer. So what are the main products? I think the traits, essential biodiversity variables, of course, that's clear, but I think there are metrics, functional diversity metrics is what we still need to test and understand to what extent we can actually provide that as information. Are the algorithms ready? I don't think for everything, because there are many things we still need to understand and test. Do we have suitable uncertainty values? I don't think so yet, because we need to get the uncertainty of the traits, of the estimates, of the radiances. So we need to get the uncertainty in the lower levels. The frequency will be okay. I think mostly yes. Maybe, likely we don't need the weekly data. We just need somehow clear time series. So maybe in some places it's going to be too cloudy, but hopefully we will get some data. And with global user communities, I mean, of course, I think there is a big gap. To me, there is a big gap with ecologists. I don't think they believe on this. And I think also they have good reasons. And I think we need to reach them. We need to convince them. I mean, first we need to demonstrate this works. And then we need to convince them it works and is valuable for them. So I think it's one of the main problems. Then, of course, biodiversity conservation, like governmental agencies and NGOs, of course, likely they are a bit easier to convince. But I think there is a big gap in ecology. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much. And now we have Akpono Akujeni, who will let you take it away.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much for this introduction. So I will talk about our work on implementing a universal retrieval scheme for quantifying time series of non-photosynthetic vegetation across diverse ecosystems. I will start where I stopped 2 days ago and Patrick stopped this morning again with the California time series. So we are really happy that we were able to acquire this nearly monthly, I would say, time series of MMAP data for 3 study sites in California. Now all sites here, the Shasta Cascades in Northern California, the North Coast, north of the Bay Area, and the Central Coast in the Santa Barbara region. So I think this is really a really nice time series, and we are really happy about this, and I think it's also really a great data set to explore the retrieval of vegetation parameter time series through time and across some ecosystems. So in this context, our focus is on the retrieval of non-photosynthetic vegetation, so NPV, which is a valuable indicator for many environmental applications, as we have heard already this morning. And our focus is actually on retrieving NPV fractional cover alongside vegetation, so green vegetation fractional cover and substrate fractional cover. So 3 land cover components that are typically found in F cover products, if you want to say so. So our workflow relies on a generalized regression model that we apply to our NMAP spectral time series to derive our F cover time series. And to train our model, we use what we call synthetic training data that we in turn derive from a comprehensive spectral library. So key for the successful application of this workflow is actually to derive a really comprehensive spectral library that includes the temporal variability of NPV, GV, and substrate cover types or spectra across ecosystems and also through time. And our approach for developing such a library is on the one hand to extract the spectra from the image based on the CAI and DVI feature space concept, and we do this stratified by land cover types to include a lot of variability into this spectral database. But we also add spectra from available spectral databases. So in our case, as we're working in California, we make use of this EcoSys spectral database, which is really helpful in this regard. So this is the same workflow Patrick presented this morning. The only difference is that we really use all spectral bands for this now. This is the spectral library that we extracted for the Californian study site. You see typical NPV, GV, and substrate spectra. On the right, you see some statistics related to the library. So we have similar shareable spectra coming from the 3 different sites. And we have 7% of the spectra coming from this EcoSys spectral library. And these are mainly materials such as leaf litter, needle litter, bark, or woody materials. So actually spectra that we cannot extract from a 30-meter NMAP pixel. Below you see the land cover types considered in the spectral library. Also here you see that we have grasslands included, croplands, forests, shrubs, also urban areas, and so on. this is our resulting time series and animation, RGB composite of NPV, the red band, GV in green, and substrate in blue band through time for the Central Coast. And here are some time series plots that I extracted from this data set. So what we see, time series forests, shrublands, and grasslands. And what is quite obvious for this region is that most of the seasonal variability we see is found in the grasslands. And what you may have also noticed is the scar of the lake fire incident in July. I think now that's I think also a nice example of how to use this data set in other ways. And wildfires is another topic we are interested in looking into. And this is why we are also currently in the process of requesting several Nmap images for most recent wildfire incidents in California. Okay, so how accurate are our maps? I must say validation is an ongoing process, so I cannot report numbers at the moment. But the nice thing about California is that we really have a high number of very high resolution Google Earth images available, really up-to-date images. And we try to make use of this as we are not, in California, we have to do this somehow in other ways. And by comparing these very high resolution images with our maps, we actually see a very nice agreement. So we are really happy about this. We are trying to extract reference fractions from the very high resolution images, but this is not always straightforward. So it's not always really easy to differentiate between soil and NPV in such very high resolution images. It's also not always clear when to say something is 100% green or not anymore. So we try to do our best, but the good thing is also we have some field data, we have field photography, we have some field-based ground layer fractions where we try to find out how much soil is there and so on. So and this is what we're trying to include into our validation data set as information. Conclusions. I think I will skip this slide for time reasons, and I would like to conclude by promoting the Nmap user workshop again next year in April in Munich. We have great hosts, so organized by Tobias Hank and Stefanie Steinhauser. Also, thank you very much for doing this, and we hope to see you there. Abstract deadline is in 10 days, I guess. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. And now Maria Santos, speak next. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to pick up on what Dana left us off with by learn by doing, by bringing you the user's perspective, in this case, scientists and land managers, to understand trait-based approaches for an inland delta, again, in California. So let me bring you to a different part of California that we haven't seen just yet, the Sacramento-San Joaquin River Delta. So as this paper published in Science identified, this is a very interesting, a different kind of interesting system because it is perhaps the third largest tidal estuary in the US, largest in the Pacific coast for sure. It has about 2,000 kilometers of waterways, provides drinking water for a large population, provides water for agriculture, a very large agricultural economy, and it has been based on land reclaimed from a historical wetland that has been reclaimed for agriculture, and therefore creating a very high risk of failure currently. It is also near ecological collapse because this is close to the entryway of many potentially invasive aquatic and alien species in terrestrial environments, being responsible to date to about 24% of the invasive species that might arrive to the continental United States. So Land managers, and there are about 800 agencies that manage the land and the waterways and all of the systems that comprise the Delta in California, they have been faced with examples like this. This is water-choked water channels with water hyacinth and Brazilian waterweed in the forefront, but you also see pennyworth in the back. And so the state had contacted us since 2003, and this is a big thank you for the state for enabling us to learn by doing and collecting very large 64 flight lines of airborne imaging spectroscopy over the last 20 years. So we were learning how to analyze this data, how to process it, and how to be able to respond to the state's needs of knowing what was the extent of these invasive species in the waterways. This was driven by the California Department of Boating and Waterways, which were mandated to maintain these waterways safe for navigation in collaboration with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, because there's endangered species that also need to be managed, and together with the Department of water resources, because as I've already mentioned, very important water resource for the state and also for global economic and agricultural products. So what we did was to produce consistent or somewhat consistent methods to be able to map on the left the submerged aquatic species and the contribution of invasive species to the submerged aquatic vegetation. On the right, an example with water hyacinth mapping and how do we actually produce maps to comply with the state requirements of where were the extent of these different communities. But the point that I wanted to make here today is that the state is now changing their interest, not just on producing the maps because they get the reliable maps every year in terms of the extent of these different vegetation communities that have different invasion potential, but they are also interested in understanding the functionality of these changing ecosystems with the presence and absence of invasive species. So what we've been examining now is to look into functional traits. Just for definition, this is the definition that we are operating under. So morphophysiological and phenological attributes that impact fitness, or that is individual performance of different individuals and therefore of species. And any trait contribution to a function is coordinated with other traits. We're starting to understand that a little bit better. Not only they can coexist, but they can also have different tempos. So one trait will enable the next trait to be able to function and perform the functions we are also interested. And therefore, this is defined as a trait syndrome. So it's a combination or a bundle of traits that might perform a given function. And that's what we're starting to understand, is like what are the functionalities within this system, and whether the invasive species and these changes in the plant communities that we report in these trait maps actually matter. Can be positive changes, like invasive species might increase carbon capture, can be negative changes, like outcompeting species that perform important functions. So what we did is a very simple preliminary approaches. We reviewed the literature for different vegetation indices that combine and normalize across different spectral features, which you see here in the central panel. Those are where we would expect certain types of absorption features that might matter for plants. And the indices, so the yellow bands are the areas of the spectrum that these indices already relate to each other. And to the right, you see some examples of the surface maps that we have been producing for these 88 vegetation indices that depict the potential functions that we would observe within these systems. So then, what I'm presenting today is what we did in comparing 2 decades, or the data that we have from 2004 to 2009, and then again from 2014 to 2019, to see if we would see changes in these trait values. And so what we see was we did not want to select certain vegetation indices. We wanted to see if the vegetation indices had consistent trends. And indeed, they do show consistent trends. But then when we think about different plant communities, and here we only looked at the emergent plant communities such as sedges and other types of emergent species, but also comparing them to more woody species that are present in the riparian areas, such as willows and so on and so forth. we see that they have very different responses in this trait space domain. So we see that the emergent species actually are responding in a more stressed way in the latest decade in 2010s in comparison to the 2000s time series, whereas the riparian areas and the riparian plants seem to be doing relatively better, at least from the list of trait indices that we observed so far. So then we wanted to plot how are these trait syndromes, so these clusters of trait values based on these vegetation indices, changing over time, because we've seen a similar plot before that we use this type of plots to understand plant strategies, but they may actually at the community level change depending on which species actually the community is composed of. And so what we see here for emergent species, the sedges and so on, what we see the differences, and then again for the riparian areas, what we see in terms of the realignment of the traits that make up the community. So if you're interested in this data set, we also just published this in the open data repository and this provides you with the metadata of the field data that we used and also of the airborne campaign data that we have been using and collecting. So with that, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Maria. The next speaker is Stefano Bignati, talking about soil.
So, good morning. Back to soil. This is a project that is funded by the Italian Specialists as Research Studies for PRISMA. It is, of course, there is a group that is composed by the University of Tuscia, that is the agronomist of the group, IGES, and my Institute of the National Research Councils. We have 3 test sites that we have investigated. The one Yolanda did is in north of Italy. This is a typical plain, Italian plain, while we have Macarese that is in the central Italy, it is coastal areas, very close to the Fiumicino Airport. So when you land to Rome, you can see on the right side of the fields. And the small areas in southern Italy, there are totally 3 different areas, so the different soil composition, soil characteristics. Fortunately, we had a quite good number of acquisition on the 3 site by using Prisma, and we have not large, but not large enough to say about 95 elementary sample units that we have sampled on the 3 sites. This is the sampling scheme that we apply on the 3 sites. And of course, having the working on soil, as we mentioned here in the previous presentation, we have the problem of a non-photosynthetic vegetation, the green photosynthetic vegetation, but also we have to add the soil moisture that is affecting the spectra of the soils. We have therefore identified 3 data sets in which we can have case 1 in which we have a wet data set to train, and we apply to a wet data set. We derived the driest data set within all the time series of the Prisma images or the time series we have available. And we trained the algorithms by using just the dry data sets, and we apply to the wet data set. The third case in which we apply train on the entire data set, we just apply on the driest images. As you can see just in the central table, we have noticed that by training on the dry data set, the results are significantly better with respect to the other type of case 1 and case 2. And we have noticed that most of the time, GPR and PLS are the 2 algorithms that are more performing within soils. Of course, algorithms are not applied just to the spectra itself, but there is a series of pre-treatment where we apply on the soil just to identify and highlight what is the major, the most performing in the retrieving. This is the output that we have obtained for the case 1, case 2, and case 3. We can see that for case 2, so training on dry and apply on the time series or on the image that we are going to consider is have good correlations. We provided, of course, the accuracy maps, while because PLSR doesn't give you the accuracy map, we have produced the VIP, in which we can say we can identify which is the wavelengths that are bringing more information to the specific parameters of interest. Knowing this, we applied to the images. In this case, is the Macarese in the column below, and Yolanda in the upper part, in which we estimated, for example, in this case, the SOC, and we applied to the SNB on the absorption, the GPR, we applied the GPR on the pre-treated SNB and absorptions data set. We obtain a reasonable evaluation of the SOC. We have produced accuracy maps, and we have with respect to training data are reasonable in terms of RMS and RPD. The same results are generally obtained but on the Macarese sites, in which we have a good agreement between the train, the test, and validation. Next. Of course, we have, as we are working with SOC and TEXO, we have, of course, the map of silt and sense. Of course, silt and sense normally they are not very detected. The accuracy in the detection of the assessment of silts and salt are not so high with respect of clays and soil organic content. Also, because there is. If we assume that sand is mainly composed by quartz, this quartz doesn't have some particular spectral features in the prisma or in the full and from the visible and in the short wave. So in that case, we have an higher values of error for detecting these two components. In the previous slide, I've just used the Prisma data because of we have some quite contemporary acquisition between EMMAP and Prisma, even though they are not perfectly aligned. We have tried to use both data sets and just to avoiding to increase the number of images that we can use. And of course, we have applied the same type of processing in detecting which are the bare soils fields. And so basically is to manage the soil moisture, and we have these are the sampling sites on the two images, and we try to train the GPR algorithms on the entire data sets and apply the trained GPR on a single image. The results are, let's say, comparable with the previous one, even though the standard deviation is higher in retrieving in this way. What is, we can see that on the standard deviation map, what we can see pop up is some current noise that is still remaining in the Prisma image, and in the processing and the standard deviation assessment is pop up. But it's generally speaking, is the amount of stored volcanic content retrieved by using the entire time series are very close, but we have higher values in the retrievals in the standard deviations. Closely, we are trying, in the sense of we figure out how we can manage the soil moisture, and we have tried a sort of autoencoder in which we, starting from the spectral library, in which we have measured on dry and wet soil, we are able to retrieve the amount of soil moisture within the spectra. We are able to sort of dryfication of the soils in order to have the possibility to train the algorithms on dry soils. Or what we can have tried to simulate is just to identify the range of soil moisture and derive ad hoc models for the different values of soil moisture in order to apply, according to the class of soil moisture, the specific models for the retrieving. very close. These are the results. This is done for the first test we have done on single fields in which we can also derive the texture, but also we derive the soil moisture on a specific soil. Last but not least, as SBG, for example, it's not just SBG, but it's also SBG tier. We have tried to couple also the emitted part of the spectrum, the thermal data. And thanks to a joint campaign with ASI and NASA JPL, we have in 2023, we had the flights on the Macarese, on the Yolanda site, and where we added also this kind of information. Of course, LST is very useful to derive between bare soil and not bare soil. We soil included, so there is two processing pipeline according if you have to use just thermal, or you can have the possibility to use both sensors. This is the LST map. And this is the next slide. This is the expected output.
I think it's very interesting that in order to maybe continue during the discussion, the last
sure.
point would be
in which we have
Thank you
also
very much, Stefano.
detect easily sense as you expected. Conclusion, this is the real results. The last slide. I would say just to say, we had yesterday a big discussion about harmonization or homogenization of the data. If you use time series, it's really important to have it as it pop up in the result, in which we have increased the standard deviation by using two sensors. And what I would like to say, LAWIR is very promising, but we have to say that soil is not an opportunity. Topsoil characteristic is not just an opportunity team within other campaigns that are doing vegetation. Soils is exposed when there is no vegetation, so we should probably split these two activities.
Thank you so much. Very good, very nice statement. Please give your applause, and then I would like to ask all the speakers to come to the front because we would like to give the audience first the opportunity to ask questions to the speakers before we start the discussion. So please. We had a couple of very interesting talks. There's a.
I have a question for Patrick. At the end of your presentation, you said you're looking forward to using imaging spectroscopy data to get at phenology. Kind of how are you planning on doing this, or like what are you most excited about using the imaging spectroscopy data for that?
I think most excited I'm about that and that also counts for what Akpona showed for California, that we indeed for the first time have such a time series available. So I haven't seen too many data sets after Hyperion where you have more or less biweekly observation density over years. So, but what you might have also seen is that there are still quite a few gaps in the data. So what I would be excited about is if we could close those gaps, because if you look a bit closer, you will see, for example, if you go into a data analysis scheme with Sentinel-2 and accept data with a maximum cloud cover of 70%, say, then you will still have quite a bit of data. In our Nmap time series, and I think it's similar as I saw in the last talk with the Prisma, it's more conservative. So usually you won't get data if there is some cloudiness level exceeded. And for me, it's really about using all available data, including if there is a 70% cloud cover. So pixel-based compositing, for example, for hyperspectral, that would be great if we could do that. But that means really going deep into that, not being conservative with the cloudiness estimates, and have a try on anything you can have. And then I think we can really get further with that.
Further questions from the audience to specific presenters? I think If not, I would like to open the discussion, and I hope you had enough coffee to make it quite lively. So we post here a couple of questions that the speakers know more or less. So that are the questions we would like to discuss now, or maybe you have also other aspects that you are very interested in. It's really towards open challenges, towards high level 3, level 4 products. And actually, maybe I will start with the first question. It's always the key questions when you plan missions. What are the main level 3, level 4 products that should be available from spaceborne hyperspectral images? And does they really provide information to come to a better understanding of Earth system processes? We have seen a couple of talks using multi-temporal data, so it's going definitely in that direction. So anyone from the audience want to make a comment, or from the speakers? The mission's already defined. Yeah.
Yeah, Ute, so the first question, which says, you know, what are the main L3L products that should be available? I think there needs to be a distinction made between the products that a specific mission might generate versus the hundreds of level 3 and level 4 products that can be generated by the research and applications communities. So there's a discrepancy there between, you know, what applications or scientific users might find versus what the missions themselves might be generating.
But specifically for, specifically for the hyperspectral missions, spaceborne missions.
And there are still hundreds of these potential products that could be generated.
Yes. So, but a lot of missions have already done selections. So most of them were in vegetation, soil direction. Is that enough, or are there more products, other products that are very important that we haven't on our list? SPG has a quite large list, CHIME has a list. All good, so good.
Well, Dana should answer that actually, simply because you had that list already up for SPG, so there are discussions ongoing. I know same for CHIME. I think what we don't mention are 2 points, and one is related to what you said, who's the end user? So there's a whole gradient of end users, and we haven't a proper definition of that. So we are not the end users mostly. We are scientists or industry or whatever, yeah. But we are usually not the ones we have to, somebody said, convince. Yeah. So having a proper definition there and taking it from there, who is interested in what, I think there's a gap. That's more a community effort, I would say, in finding out. The second one I forgot. Let's go.
Sure. I'm going to get away from that mic so I don't echo too much. I guess one thing that we often hear, I'd be interested to see if you agree, Sean, but is that in addition, we're baselining a few traits as part of SBG, but vegetation communities is often something that people really want, especially land managers, folks that are trying, invasive communities, things like this. So, and that's something that really has to be done at a somewhat local level too, because you have to understand your local vegetation communities. You need experts that can define those well. And so these may not be global products, but they may be products that are collaborative between the missions and, local communities are providing tools so that people can build their own for monitoring over long term. So I feel like there are these products that I think are going to be incredibly valuable at kind of the local to, landscape, maybe state level, but that are always going to be a struggle for a mission to provide because of the global nature. So I think that there's some interesting things that would be highly valuable there.
Now it comes back to me, it was exactly about that. I think what we also miss in our discussions most of the time is that now with SPG and CHIME and the Horizon, we should think global and time series. And you mentioned that more than once, and others did that as well. And I think there's probably the lack, and there's probably also where we cannot properly answer it yet, because all these great campaigns, airborne campaigns that we have have a certain limitation towards that. So even if we go across the continents, have a campaign there and there and there, at the end of the day, we have to kind of show that based on the satellites that are now in orbit. And we lack doing that at the moment. So I think especially for the large area multi-temporal, we have to get better. We simply don't know yet. So, and that relates to also other questions that you pose later.
So hello. I have a question more from the producer side. And it's a bit maybe naive, but why do you want the producer to produce the L3 and L4 products? So as opposed to computing it yourselves, do you filter the acquisitions based on this? Do you explore based on this? So can you comment?
Was that? All right, well, I'm holding a mic, so I'll say something. But I mean, I guess, you know, to some extent, there's only so many algorithms that missions can support from a funding perspective. And so we're, at least for us, we're kind of baselining that based on the recommendations of the, you know, U.S. National Academy survey. And so they kind of outlined a series of high priorities, and then we kind of crosswalk those with what we thought we could do. And that's where we're stopping. There's a lot of, you know, additional Earth system modeling that could go on, predictions that could be made, lots of other really amazing science that can be done. But that is where, you know, from a mission perspective, we transition to hopefully having a competed science team that will do some of that work, and then the community will be leveraging those data to do that work. And that, at least, maybe other folks can comment on CHIME perspective, but that's where kind of we stop.
Yeah. So since I found the mic here, I make a request as well. I'm strongly involved in the CEOS LPV group, which is a land product validation group. I'm not sure whether you are aware of, but you know, that has been running over a few decades now, and the mandate, I would say, of this group is really to address the requirement of the climate community. For some of the vegetation products, we have some very clear requirements for LI, HYPER, and so on, in terms of spatial temporal resolution, uncertainty requirement. So based on that, you know, we were trying to formulate protocols, community protocols, best practice for validations to answer to these requirements, which are evolving over the years. So there is a, you know, a very strong link with the climate community and very clear requirements. I believe this is not quite the same. I mean, with respect to the biodiversity community, I believe now they start listing a series of essential biodiversity variables and remote sensing measurement that should provide input for deriving those variables. Although I believe the maturity in terms of requirement is not the same as for the climate variable, such as LI, HYPER. So how do you see this moving forward with the new upcoming HYPERSPECTRAL missions and with a better definition of requirements in terms of spatial temporal resolution, uncertainty requirement, and best practice protocols? That was my question. Thank you.
Well, I might hand that to our speaker on biodiversity work.
Yes, I don't know what are the requirements. I think it's an open question. This for the application. I mean, I think the biodiversity application is particular because we don't want to know the mean. We want to know the mean, but we also want to know the diversity. And there, I don't know what is the needs. I think, I mean, to me, it's a completely open question. I think we need to understand many things about the scales we are working at, and I don't think we know yet. I think it's we can try to validate. For example, I mean, if your pixel is 30 meters, your estimate on the average is 30 meters, but you have many species inside, you have many plants inside. And if you compute a metric on the diversity based on that, that's not informative. I mean, that doesn't correlate to whatever ecological sample in the field. You can, for example, try to pan-sharpen this with Sentinel-2, for example, and then you will have, with the new generation, maybe 5 meters or now 10 meters. This is still enough. Likely it depends on the kind of vegetation. So if there's trees, maybe for trees is fine, but maybe for grassland it's not. So the requirements, I don't think we know, and likely they differ on the application, on the variable, and maybe even differ in the metric you are using. So I think there are many open questions there. I think we must try to get as most accurate estimates as possible, but then there is another bunch of questions we don't really have an answer yet. So we can try to understand the accuracy of the estimates of the traits, but I think for the case of biodiversity, I think there are more questions behind that is totally open now. I don't think we know.
Yep. I would reiterate that for biodiversity, we're still very much in the infancy in terms of understanding what are these essential biodiversity variables, how do they matter for biodiversity processes, and modeling those at local to global scales. What we've seen with the level 3, 4 products, they are about functions, but functions come from composition of different species, and we're talking about plants, and we're not even including other types of organisms. And when we're thinking about the trends and existing data for other type of taxonomic groups, we see quite different trends between plants and other taxonomic groups. So those are very many points that are very open in the biodiversity aspects. So here my reading is we're very focused on biosphere integrity and how it relates with Earth system processes. But biodiversity has their own processes and their own needs, either genetic diversity conservation or understanding. We didn't even touch that. Organisms that I tried to talk about species and the different drivers of change of biodiversity. I talked a little bit of one of them, the invasive species, but we have, of course, climate change, land use change, over exploitation and pollution, and those we don't have a very good understanding of the attribution of the changes to the drivers. So I think we're very early on this development.
I'd like to thank you all for your nice presentation. I think it is time to think who will be our customers. And all of these products are for us as a scientist. And who will be the customers that will buy this information, or we need to convince them? We are convinced already. So I think this is the moment to think about long term and how to sell this information, not to end user, of course end user, but the customers. And this will be actually will inspire our technology, because we are all convinced, and this is very nicely presented. So I would like to hear your opinion on that.
So that's an excellent question, and I think that we have a growing number of customers. So I'm also part of the Competence Center on Sustainable Finance. And at least in Europe, we have now a mandate for corporates to report their biodiversity impacts. And we get a lot of requests from companies, businesses, all kinds, and also financial institutions, investors, banks, to know, and also insurance and reinsurance companies to know what are the impacts. And so there's a lot of demand at the moment, and this demand would definitely increase. But of course, other users are some agencies, like I've mentioned, and NGOs beyond the scientists.
Before we come to the next question, maybe would you like to say something about soils? Because how is the soil hyperspectral community to?
I think that for that probably is more easy, because we are working on I refer to topsoil and agricultural framework, in which pass through this type of data to a prescription maps for a big farmer, not a single farmer, is have an economic impact very clear. And I think that most of the big farms, they know already this one. So if you go to impact on the reduction of fertilizer or others, or optimizing the yield for a company, it's make is already there. So to me, probably in the biodiversity stuff is more complicated also because the actors have different levels. So for agriculture, for issue of soils, I think is more easy with respect. So it's very, very close to the customer, probably. It's my impression, I hope.
Maybe I can add, it's also important for local authorities who might need to report on soil organic carbon, for example, and changes in the future.
I think that the second point, the second question you had, no, the third one, you say, if L3, L4 can measure soil organic carbon change, this could be a very point. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, thank you. We have almost last question, I think.
Okay, I'm missing a very important question here. We're talking about global products. How are we going to go about validating a global product? And I think it's not a single organization that can do that, and it needs the community. So what is our plan to validate these global products? How do we bring the community together to do that? I think that's probably the biggest challenge of them all.
I mean, that's the same problem that was faced by, for example, the motor science team or the land science team decades ago. So I totally agree with you. It's a community effort. Then again, what we can also do, I mentioned, I think it's really important to link up with the experiences from the multispectral and future superspectral sensors that we will have. But we can also link up to the experiences from those communities in terms of validation strategies. So there have been great efforts across the continents, across the agencies as well. And I think we have to piggyback on that and do it in a similar way. And maybe to add to that, I think it's not just the validation. It's also, we should think another step ahead. We should think towards collections of hyperspectral global data. That's what we see now. The Lancet Science team had brought up, it's now a third generation emerging next year. We see for the Sentinel-2, we have the first collection, and collections develop over time. And for this hyperspectral, we will have a development. So with 2030, it will not be there. It will be in space, but it will develop greatly over the first, say, a few years. So we have to have collections to have a clear agency on what is in the data and what is not. And it will change over time, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. I think that having these global observations is definitely going to push us to develop further. And so I think building the kind of collaborative ties within disciplines to understand the networks that we need and continue to build them and reinforce them and build trust across groups is a really important part at this stage so that we can be ready to start that development and engage with each other and be proactive as those sensors come online.
I would have one more remark. I fully agree with Patrick that we should follow up on what the previous legacy is from the other multispectral missions. Nevertheless, we have a new type of products, and especially if we go to the leaf level, and if we want to deliver nitrogen at the leaf level, or if we want to deliver water content, chlorophyll content, these are completely new things, and the validation protocols are not available from the legacy missions for this. And we need to think as well, multi-scale maybe. So there is a lot to do, and then I would tend to say, yeah, we need to have a plan how to go to these new domains. And I see that the initiative is like making a database of traits and so on. It's great, but advertise them out of this bubble and get on board much more the people who are really working in the field and get these data in. But as well, the way that we understand the uncertainty behind and so on, because this is hand by hand. The third point over there, I wanted to say, like the canopy level, the uncertainties are different to the leaf level. Leaf level is the still problem.
I think
there's
one
response.
Sorry. Sorry.
So I just very quickly wanted to follow up on that. EOS validation, great idea. I think Bigfoot, Safari 2000, there's really good examples of approaches that statistically and spatially and temporally about validating general remote sensing data, but then we have to layer on this new dimension of spectral fidelity and how we do that in really complex geometries or over simple geometries, complex geometries. The validation of the leaf level, I think, also matches the idea that we need to get the functional trait ecology community to buy into what we're doing. I think we need to bring them into the tent and work with them on developing sampling protocols that fit their existing protocols and the capability and what they do in terms of the TRI database and these other global efforts, bring those into our community, pair them up with remote sensing data, and then build a connection that way. I don't think we've done a great job of doing that yet. I think we can do better, and it might feed back in terms of getting them to buy in more of what we can do with spectral data.
All right. Well, thank you for the lively discussion. I think we are at time and people are probably ready for coffee. So,
Yeah,
thanks to
so
all
with
our
this,
speakers.
thank all the speakers, thank the audience, and keep on moving with the discussion during the coffee break.
With summary and discussion, some wrap up from the breakout sessions, and then don't sit too far because we would like to hear from you. So don't climb up to the top. And I understand that still some of you would need to reserve a shuttle to Schiphol for later. So you have the number of the company, the taxi company that you can call in the welcome package, or if it's the shuttle that you want to take at the, I think it's 4:30, 5:36, but please check in the welcome package. This can be booked at the ESTEC reception, and we can pass by on our way to lunch. We can walk by the reception on our way to lunch. Okay? So I think Jens, Rob, Sabine, Roberto, Claudia. So Rob, Jens, Sabine, Claudia, please, if you could just take a seat here on stage. This eases a little bit our conversation. And Anke, of course. Huh? No, it's not just, yeah, exactly. Okay, so first of all, really thank you very much. It's been an immense pleasure in these 2 days. We have still some work to do in this final session, and I think it's a very important part of the reason we are here. We started at the beginning with clear objectives of trying to come up with an updated set of recommendations to understand if we are moving in the right direction compared to what the community needs, and how to adjust, how to do better, and so on and so forth. So I think this is a very important part of this. I will not, let's say, say much because I would like to leave the floor to Rob first. But I just want to mention something that I don't want to forget, that we will contact you by email to request the authorization to publish on the workshop website the presentations that you've provided to us. And we would also like very much to publish the posters that you've presented, because I think there's a lot of information behind the screen which would be worth sharing with the community. For that, of course, we need to ask you to send us the file, because we did not collect those files here these days. So you will be, I think, contacted again by email from us, and please, if you agree, upload your poster. For the WebEx, I mean, you've been told a couple of times that this event was also streamed by WebEx. We have been recording that as for the welcome package, and these recordings will go into the YouTube channel of ESA Earth Observation Open Science. Maybe we can also display the website later on, or the link later on. Yes, just a couple of numbers. I think we were 180 participants here, and we had at times 100 people connected in WebEx. So yeah, so thank you very much for this participation. And but we will get back here. Just I was surprised by these numbers positively, of course, and so just wanted to thank you for that. And Rob, please.
All right, so I think, do you want us to go through the sessions or just some comments in general? Okay, so.
We will have some key, let's say, moderators of the breakout sessions reporting specifically on each of the three. But I would really like to start with thoughts and your summary view on what we've gone through so far.
All right. Again, that's humbling to include me in that manner. Maybe I'll just stand up here if this is on. Again, I want to, first, I think we all need to offer a hand of applause to Marco and and Anka and the entire ESA team who's put this together. It's quite extraordinary. So I do want to thank you so much for your leadership, and absolutely, Anka, you as well. I was on many calls at 7 a.m. in California as we were working on this. So this has been a really extraordinary workshop. It's building on a series. I think we've gotten more into the nitty-gritty of the details of how we're going to try to move more towards the weekly revisit, which was one of the outcomes from that first session, the desire to get there, worrying about how we make the data interoperable, and then yesterday and today on the questions of calibration and validation. How are we going to get products that have units and uncertainties that are intercomparable so we can get to this time series? So I think we're moving absolutely in the right direction, and these workshops are very important. At one point it was commented there are other groups in the multispectral working on CalVal and stuff. We don't want to be redundant with them, but I think we have some specific challenges when I was talking with Jens and Ahmed earlier that are different than the early days of Landsat. In the early days of Landsat, that's where I started, a ratio and NDVI, those were the sorts of things, and you would make interpretations from that. With spectroscopy, we're in the world of chemistry, soil chemistry, I see Al here, where we're going to make claims about what molecules are there, how much, and at what concentration. It's very different. So we have a different set of challenges. So I think that's what this group and this community is discussing and thinking about, so that we're prepared for SBG and CHIME, and we're taking advantage of NMAP and PRISMA and the other spectrometers that are up there now. So I think this was a wonderful 3 days, and we actually came a day early and worked on an overview paper, and I'm incredibly enthusiastic. Even though there's some challenges for us on the other side of the Atlantic, I think we're looking forward to a bright future with these types of measurements available to do the science and the applications that we all know we can do, and we've been demonstrating at the local and regional scale. So I think I'll stop there, but again, this has been very good. Maybe the one more thing I did talk, it has been discussed, and I think we will offer to host the next in the series of these workshops about 2 years from now, maybe in this time frame, and that would be NASA hosted. It's only fair. And we're thinking maybe doing Florida near Cape Kennedy would be nice in this time of year. And it's a very interesting place now because they're launching many times every week. So there will obviously be a chance to watch some rockets launch, which 10 years, 20 years ago was very rare, but now that's something else. So without objection, I think that's something we will start to work to organize. Not that we won't interact over the next 2 years, of course, pulling together the conclusions here, but we also, I think, would look forward to, there'll be more things to continue to do, I think, in about the 2-year time frame where this meeting is valuable as we work on this international collaboration. Okay, thank you.
So I hope that you will be even more motivated to be part of the discussion, with having in mind the chance to join in a couple of years in the US, this new edition of the event. But thanks a lot, Rob. I would, if you agree, I would go through the summary from the breakout sessions now, and then we can start the discussion with you. So I think we can start from the calibration and validation breakout, and we have some slides put together by Chip, Valentina, Rob, and others. And please.
Thanks. So I'll represent the very energetic discussion that took place over the 2 hours in this room yesterday afternoon with Valentina, Roberto, and Rob as, and Regina as helping to chair this as well. So we've had a chance to go over and hear some of the highlights that we were finding. So there's a challenge in that calibration and validation we had previously discussed separately by data product level, level 1A, level 1B, level 1C, level 2, and then for the level 2 plus products. And there was a comment earlier this morning during the previous session where we now have the opportunity to look globally, and how do we validate globally? And this is one of the things that happens when we're discussing this, whether we're talking about radiances, reflectances, or these higher level products. So you have different challenges all up and down the line. And in fact, if you think about imaging spectroscopy, that means that you also have challenges with not only radiometric from the spectroscopy, radiometric and spectral, but you have geometric and image quality cal-val challenges that you have to think about as well. There's the difference between land and water, so that really kind of multiplies the amount of work times 2. One needs to think about across various missions having standardized definitions of what the products are. Currently, it seems that some of the end users are a bit baffled by taking a product from one mission, and it's not identically the same format or even sets of units as a product from another mission. And so we need to work on that so that things are more easily used. One thing that Rob brings up to us again and again and again and resonates is that harmonized data products do not mean identical data products. We're not trying to take a CHIME or an SBG or an NMAP or a DESIS product and make them be exactly the same. What this interoperability really means is that within the measurement uncertainties for a given observation, they should overlap. Okay, and that's what we're trying to make as a harmonized product, reporting all of the information, the data, the metadata, the uncertainties, providing you with the provenance, et cetera, so that people generating higher level data products can take this information in and know what set of information will be provided. So that, I think, is where we're moving towards in terms of harmonization. And then this level 2 plus validation is again quite challenging, but it needs to really reflect measurements at the sites that are of the products that would be inferred from taking a reflectance into an algorithm and generating, for instance, snow properties, the real thing that would be inferred would be the grain size of the snow. And so we need to know that, or the impurities that would be involved there. Likewise, with vegetation, there are various foliar traits that could be retrieved. Those are the things that need to be measured directly. For soils, there are other myriad products that one would need to have. And so these are the types of things that were discussed there. If I can have the next slide, please. In terms of the Cal-Val sites, standardized procedures and protocols, this is well underway. We discussed also the possibility of having perhaps even standardized hardware that could be used to help increase the precision and the accuracy of the measurements, especially with respect to their reproducibility. We need to cover a wide range of latitudes with the sites that are chosen so that we have the ability to understand viewing angle dependencies and seasonal dependencies there. And then definitely cover the dynamic range of radiances that would be experienced both over land and ocean, so that the radiances and reflectances across the full spectrum that we're thinking about. And this might entail selecting slightly different sites than the usual picks, the pseudo-invariant calibration sites that tend to be relatively bright. And so let's see, okay, and then next, leveraging the existing networks. Again, this is not only for radiometric calibration, but also for the higher level data products. We have to begin using heterogeneous scenes. We can't just find large homogeneous scenes to use. And then we need to have spatial representativeness, and the validation must be done at scales commensurate with the ground system sampling, the GSD, or the pixel size. And so we need to have that, and that'll come up again in just a moment. Temporal sampling is key, and that can be done much more continuously at validation sites, and then provides the context in which to understand the snapshot measurements that one gets in the remote sensing. And then finally, there are many challenges with atmospheric correction, BRDF, et cetera, and we have to sample appropriately there. Whoops, I'm sorry, I didn't take off the super sites and drones. Finally, one more slide. Those are covered on the next page. So this idea of super sites, sites at which we have the assets that are required to validate multiple different levels of data products. So radiances and reflectances, and perhaps even also some of the higher level data products that can be generated. The idea of not only doing boots on the ground, as we say in America, or field campaigns to make the spectral measurements, but having tower mounted, or perhaps in the future even drone or UAS mounted spectrometers that can make these measurements. And that would be really nice, especially from the perspective of the drones and towers to some extent, if you can sample up the full spatial range, but not only sampling spatial heterogeneity, but also doing it in a non-contact way so that the pristine nature of the surface is not disturbed. And that's really important at many of the sites that we're using currently. And then Valentina let us know that CEOS is thinking about many of these things as well, and there will soon be a set of protocols for the use of drones to measure reflectance that will be released with their best practices. So for the other chairs, was there anything else that you all would like added? All right, great. Well, thank you very much to everyone who participated in that discussion.
Thank you very much. I think this is a good start. Lots of things that I must say are also very much cross-cutting, I believe, between sessions. David, would you like to yeah, we can try to. I excessively summarized our notes into even more into a few points, notes that we've definitely collected together. So
Thanks. Suffice to say, it was a fantastic discussion. I think a very sophisticated discussion that went well beyond the harmonization discussions of a couple of years ago, adding a new layer of subtlety and brought up some new points that I think I'll definitely take away. One of them, well, we started off with a definition of harmonization, which is that the sensors are calibrated to the same standard, but retain the unique characteristics of each of the independent sensors, the sampling of the sensors. And this is compatible, I think, with what Chip said as well. Daniel brought up this idea of spectra as 3D point clouds, which I think is a great controlling metaphor for the way that we discussed the proper processing of spectroscopic data. That spectra have a unique 3D position. There is the distribution of photons and associated response functions captured with that. And recognizing that nature of spectra, preserving the sanctity of the spectrum in its acquisition is really valuable as we try to preserve accuracy for the most challenging science and applications objectives. Another important topic that recurred throughout the discussion was the use of uncertainties in harmonization. And of course, the other breakout session raised this as well. In comparing two measurements meaningfully in a principled way, you need uncertainties on both. And the uncertainties are also a way to encapsulate all of the assumptions that have come in to the upstream processing that leads you to that point. So it's really a wonderful interface between processing levels that permits products to be used interoperably across different missions, regardless of how the physics assumptions that they use to get to that point, provided those uncertainties are correct. And we concluded that uncertainties together with the geographic locations of spectra are really the minimum fundamental data set that you would need in order to permit this interoperable, intercomparable use of different mission data. There was a long discussion of software tools and workflow examples. We recognize that there's a broad user community and many applications require resampling data. Even if that isn't the way the products are produced, there's a large and growing machine learning community that require very consistent spectral sampling. And so in the interest of broadening our user communities to the largest possible groups, we felt it would be valuable to have at least some tools, best practice examples, software tools distributed either by the missions or by community members publicly, so that individual research groups don't have to rewrite the code themselves to align products to common grids if they choose to do so. And this might be sort of a way that we can handle the maximum number of use cases, preserving the accuracy and the unique nature of the spectroscopic measurements for those applications that really demand it, while at the same time facilitating this uptake by the entire user community. In the same vein of broadening the user groups, it was recognized that uncertainties today really aren't being utilized to their full potential. Even though missions are starting to distribute uncertainties, they aren't really being utilized. And so there's a lot that we can do as missions to improve, to educate the community on how best to use these uncertainties, either through workshops or tutorials. We can then disseminate that knowledge so that uncertainties are better used and really promote their uptake. Let's see. And then finally, the discussion of sensor agnostic algorithms. Of course, this is related to harmonization. It's broadly recognized that we'll need sensor agnostic algorithms both in the same mission to handle the different spectral calibrations of multiple focal plane arrays to make consistent global maps across that entire swath, but also between missions in order to densify our time series. And many algorithms are sensor agnostic already. So the physics-based approaches used in aquatic regimes, in snow retrieval algorithms, in geology are already largely sensor agnostic. And many others can be made so if you simply include a pre-processing step to align to whatever spectral grid was used in the training data. So I think this goal is achievable, but of course different communities may arrive there in different ways, and we should strive to support all of those uses of the data. And yeah, that's all. And to my colleagues, please let me know if there's anything I missed.
No, I've excessively synthesized the notes that we put together in a more extensive fashion. There will be also more to come in when we are able to process more properly all these notes. This is just the talking points to stimulate the discussions. And Sabine, you have anything to add to that? Great. So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, David. And I would suggest we move to the open science breakout, and then keep in mind all the questions or additional points that you have, because we have time for that.
Okay, so first I want to thank everybody who was in the room following that lively discussion. We really had a very nice discussion, and I think we've covered a lot of topics. It's still a field to be also a little bit developed and to be also defined. And I'm going to try to summarize. Unfortunately, Phil cannot be with us today, who supported yesterday. But I also want to thank Regina, Anka, and Jeff, who cannot be here today, who prepared this session before. And yeah, then please, next slide. So these are the questions, and they are just plotted here. I'm not going to go through them, which we, in the preparation of this session, came up with, and they are just here for documentation. So I think you're going to receive these slides later, and then you can check these questions, because I think we're going to talk about this the next years as well. So next slide, please. And we tried to summarize a little bit what's most important if you think about open science developments. And I'm just going over what we as a group collected yesterday. So we were saying that we need metadata, and they need to be readable. That's a point. Then maintenance was an issue which was raised. And I think we have mentioned that also before, that maintenance usually isn't considered when you set up the infrastructure, but it's important to have a long-term insurance of usability of the data, for example. Then with this comes documentation, which is the key to open science. And during the discussion of higher quality coding, it was suggested that maybe coding standards just equals documentation. So you can go into that, either that direction or the other direction, but I think we are all aware that we need to document what we're doing, and that helps us to make the science we do usable for others coming afterwards. Then it was also discussion about to use the data off the shelf. So you need to be able to quickly grasp the basics, and sharing knowledge. So we're all aware of it, that if we don't share, then we cannot evolve in the field. So we need to experiment, and sometimes we need to dive into that. But on the other hand, we need to share in order to make this a common effort. And I think that's clear. One thing we came up with for open science is that user support is critical. So you still need contact persons there sometimes. You need a user forum or something like this in order to follow the development and upcoming questions. If not, things are not usable. And then enhance the engagement from the global south. It's just one sentence here, but I think Patrick has raised that yesterday, and we would like to support it. And the CEUS working groups are one option to do this. The other thing is documentation. And I think it's the work of all of us to spread the worldwide data we have throughout the globe for usage, and also to promote our work and to promote the users from other countries in order to come here, for example, and to present their work and to share, even if maybe they are very much starting in the field, but to encourage them. And what we also had as a point is that standards need to be something that works well with what industry uses. If not, they won't be adapted. But this discussion was also a little bit critical, because standards in industry are different from those in science, and it's two different fields, but something to be kept in mind. Okay, and then please the next slide. What was good to see is that we already have kind of an open science situation. So we have tools out there like the Nmap box or Snap. We have the education programs, we have tutorials, Our workshop's going to be shared. So that's the step which is important. It's access, and that's how you can improve the community, or you can broaden the community. And then you need open tools. That works well from our perspective. So it's getting easier to switch between tools and languages. There are more ways how to translate between codes, for example. Tools and code for data access and exploration keep improving. And there's a surge of tools coming into the public domain. So we already see a development there. We thought that's working well. And for open data, what was seen positively is that space agencies and also research funds, they require the data to be published. But we had a discussion on that because there's a lot of data out there published, which is basically crap. You cannot reproduce it, we cannot work with it. But yeah, we kind of said that we would even be willing to follow standards there if they are improved, if they're imposed on us. So this is a discussion, I think, which needs to be followed, and it needs to be followed from the university side, I think, and from the agency side, we can say, okay, we can impose those standards in order to make the data really reusable. I think NASA and ESA are there in a good way, and we're also trying our very best. And yeah, then there are standards for architectural processing chain. For example, you have standards there already. And the ability to share data measured and results with documentation is already there, which was seen positively. So maybe it's clear, but it was a point raised. And I think you have the ability, if you want to, that you can share your data. That situation wasn't always like that. And we would like to keep that situation. And then harmonizing metadata between missions is possible yet as well. However, there's still room for improvement. And we did a big step towards field data. So we have a lot of data already out there, which makes open science developments possible. And what needs more work was documentation. I think that's a task of all of us. Education, to ease the access to the data. And we are working on that. I can also say from NMAP side, we are always trying to improve the data access. And I think if we think about CHIME and upcoming SPG missions, we need somehow like a common data platform, but always there will be different platforms and different data access. And something which we have discussed is that for Sentinel, for example, you have like 3 repositories out there. And from a user perspective, you don't know what's the difference of the data before you have downloaded it. And then you're downloading the whole data, and then you know the difference, but you have already had like 800 gigabytes. So that's something we can think about. And then, as I already said at the very beginning, so we should consider maintenance as part of the infrastructural costs when we set up certain projects. And we often don't reel out of the bubble. So bringing spectroscopy still out to user communities which are not so aware of it, it's our task. So I think we should spread the word about hyperspectral still in the science community, but also in society. Because all what we are working on is like, most of it is public funding, and we believe in that, but not everybody is aware of this. And I think we're doing a good job, but still tell everybody how great hyperspectral data are and that it really helps us. So yeah, with that I would close. Thank you.
Thanks, Vera, and I just want to a big thank you to all the rapporteurs, because I mean it has been a very long day yesterday, so this has been done basically overnight and very early this morning. So thank you all very much. We can just open, I believe, the floor for discussion, because basically 2 years ago we were closing the workshop now, with some summary out of the different parallel sessions that we had. This time we saved an additional hour, basically. We carved out of the minutes from each presentation of some of the other things, and maybe early start to have this this time to really discuss again. After you've heard all of that, after we've discussed yesterday in the breakout groups, probably some of you would have loved to follow more than one breakout group. Now it's the chance to comment on also on the summary from the other discussions, and yeah, we're hearing from you. And This includes also those of you on stage, of course. This is not a panel. It's just I think it's going to ease a bit the discussion. Yes, Sean, please. Pretty sure you will be in better shape when leaving this workshop, thanks to all the stairs that you've gone through up and down.
Since we have representation from space agencies here that do a lot of funding of research, the open science, open data is great. I think the one point that I was making yesterday that I kind of want to follow through with is there's a very low bar to publish and say you have open data. It doesn't necessarily mean the data is very
Can you put the microphone is slightly closer?
Oh, sorry. There's a low bar for getting your data published and making it over the journal hoop. Usually it's done last minute by any project, particularly when you run out of funding. Is it not working? Yeah. Can you hear? Oh, you can hear me?
Yeah,
okay. Okay. My main point was I think we should consider when you're funded by a space agency, if you have data that you need to make public, provide an opportunity or a carrot at the end of your project to receive a last tranche of funding that you can't access till the end, that allows you to get data really well curated and online so that it's in a really good shape for people to use, rather than those users spending years trying to get your data in shape to later use, and then you have this progressing problem of everyone running out of funding because you're trying to get data up to the point that you can use it in synthesis projects.
I think it's more than that. The preparation of the open data and the open code should be to start on day zero of a project. So it is now difficult to believe that you can start a project where you're going to collect a publicly funded activity. You don't have a work package since day one that is preparing for the open source code and the openly and freely available data. And that's really, so it cannot be, it cannot be an afterthought. It's not something you do in the last 4 months of a project. You have to do it day by day from start with agreed formats and agreed interchange and interoperability and whatnot since start. So otherwise, obviously, it never happens. Perhaps, one of my many hats that I oversee the operational production within a Copernicus service. So everything is done, everything is sustained, openly available. It's an awful lot of effort. Takes resources out of something else, but those resources are there. More and more, for some of these projects, make clear from start that the data has to be then there. There's a clear work package, so the effort is funded. So there is also, to the funding agency, this effort doesn't come for free, so needs dedicated resources. The same is, for instance, we've been talking about HyperNets for the last couple of days. We are the first European project that set up part of the things. Now we have an ESA-funded project, which is moving us towards pre-operations, and we are able to provide publicly available, fully documented data available. But there is a lot of effort that needs supporting, so that's the problem. But it cannot be an afterthought.
Recognized and supported.
Okay, maybe a side note on what we also heard on the open science. I heard you saying there anyone should avoid downloading the wrong data. I think as individual researchers, we should also avoid downloading the right data. Nowadays, I see a big role for platforms like the Copernicus CDSE, where they could keep track of having the right data reprocessed with all the good metadata, and that should help out a lot as well in getting more open data and having it well documented.
I think that for increasing the user uptake on the imaging spectroscopy data, it is, yes, a good option to standardize the data format and to make it freely available. But first of all, it depends if the user has a machine that is capable of processing the data. Therefore, I was wondering whether it could be an option to develop some kind of web-based platforms that allow for some kind of processing, therefore taking out of the equation the limitation deriving from computational power from the user perspective.
You mean virtual machine, right? You mean virtual machine in order to develop our product, our last product? Yeah, yeah.
Solution that allows everyone to. Thank you. There's not a solution that allows everyone to process the data in the same way. And as, for example, there is the Sentinel Hub, for example, to visualize basic indexes that you can compute on the fly on the old Sentinel-2, for example, data set. I understand that hyperspectral data has a different complexity, as also considering the data volume and the representation of the data. But I think that at least if I were a user that should start using hyperspectral data, one of the first things would be for me to get a chance to manipulate the data in an easy and understandable way with a kind of platform that I can log in on the fly, rather than having complex tools that are still accessible and are super powerful and allow you to perform new and advanced or even basic, like the Nmap toolbox has the visualization for the different response of the spectra depending on the vegetation parameters, which is something that is incredibly useful for educational purposes to understand the impact of spectra and the parameters. But nevertheless, you first have to understand where to go or to find the resource.
So maybe it's not need only to have virtual machines or something like that, but also have the how they say from open science. We have to have the documentation also, the tutorials. We are living in 2024 and go to 2025, and we are one YouTube video far to find something to use it. We have to spread this knowledge. I don't know how to develop new algorithms and all that, but I have to know how to use those algorithms. That you say, really? Or that's the most important thing.
I think before we go to space agencies and ask them to share the data and also to archive the data in a way that we can use, we need to think about our laboratory, our group. And I have been asked to produce some data 20 years ago that I have been measured. I was like spending hours to find it because the system or the archive system in my lab is not that, I think in many others are not that, compromised to do that. And because of that, there is a spin-off company called Ocean that helps those laboratory to archive the data in a way that they be able to find all the information and share this information with others. So I think, this new laboratory or new group that are starting now, or maybe started 4 or 5 years ago, we started this technology 30 years ago. Maybe they should approach such an initiative and try to archive the data in-house in a way that they will be able to find the data that they acquire or process years ago. This is one thing. And the other thing that I would like to mention in open science, we didn't discuss this, but this is a hot topic called citizen science. I think citizen science can be very helpful for validation and calibration in hyperspectral or in remote sensing itself. We've been doing this now, but I think we should also take a look on this direction.
Anything from the stage? Also, I very much like the discussion on open science, but does this mean, I mean, we're focusing on that, does this mean that everything else is really agreed? We have a common view on all the things that we've discussed, calibration and validation, open challenges and product harmonization, and how to move on in the algorithms development? Just as a genuine question, huh? I mean, or is there something that you feel still it's urgent to be clarified, discussed, further digged also on the other topics? Oh yeah, Regina? Yeah.
Yeah, to your point, I think something that came up in the CalVal session that I think is really important was and Chip mentioned this in the summary, but the higher level products I think is something that we haven't thought about as much as far as the validation sites and having things that are going over time and accessible across instruments. And we kind of broke into that topic, but I think that would be a really good area to keep talking about more as we move forward. And I was really loving all of the presentations this morning on all of those higher level products. And I think we've done a ton of work on radiance and reflectance and talking about how we're going to harmonize those, but those higher level products is going to be where a lot of those users will be using the data. And I think there's a lot more to explore there. So that's just my personal comment. But.
Thanks, Jens. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, okay, I'm here. I have a point about the calibration. I was not in this session. I think it's important to remember and to highlight that we have, especially for hyperspectral data, an issue on calibration of dark targets, such as aquatic targets. And this is really key to have a good quality products, as Regina just mentioned. And up to now, there is no really, I would say, we have vicarious calibration, but it's not enough for aquatic targets. And there is no onboard calibration that allows to get the requirements that we expect to have. Calibration absolute less than 3%, for example. And so I'm wondering if in the future, for hyperspectral data, efforts should be made in proposing some calibration device on board that could match with hyperspectral requirements for scientists working on these dark targets. How could we improve that?
That's a really good, I was in the CalVal session and that came up, that there is a need for vicarious targets that are dark, medium, and bright. And dark doesn't necessarily mean water targets because those are zero at much of the SWIR typically, except for glint. And there are targets like that on the surface of the Earth. They're often basaltic lava flows. There's some in Hawaii, which might be nice. And so I think that that's an important, I'm a fan of using targets that are on the surface of the Earth because that's the place we're doing our science from too. So if you can get them to match there, then that will propagate to the rest of the Earth. So I think that's a really important point. I also wanted to echo, I thought the idea of the virtual machine for testing spectroscopic algorithms, I'm not quite sure how to do that, but I think that's important. Not everyone can download full cubes of, hundreds of gigabytes and get the algorithms and do that. So maybe there is, I think Google Earth Engine is maybe a take at that, but maybe there's something that we could think about in the interim. And report on 2 years from now on strategies to how we can let people test their algorithms on the data set without having to bring the data set local and have a machine that's capable of processing it, because there are computational challenges with more sophisticated spectroscopic algorithms. So, but those are both great points, and hopefully we'll get them into the summary of this workshop.
Yeah, I was thinking there's also sort of the next step that we're all, I think, want to get to, but aren't there yet, which is letting our products out in the world. So beyond the scientific community to the non-scientific users, and giving them a way to have confidence or not in the product. So not only uncertainty, but should this product be applied in this location? What are, you know, the requirements of this algorithm to run, so that if I take this data and I use it for my site, I have some idea whether that particular product is applicable or not?
Sorry, I mean, had no chance to attend to the calibration and validation session. I was in another one, sorry for that. Maybe I missed the point in the summary, but I wanted to stress also for the validation, especially for the atmospheric correction. I think it would be really important also for the identification of the systematic effects and so on. Also the calibration and validation sites, not only for longitude and latitude and surfaces, but also for atmospheric, aerosols, and water vapor conditions. To also select the sites where there is a heavy load of aerosols, maybe water, also especially because we know that there is already some confusion and some problems to differentiate and to decouple the surface from the aerosols themselves.
Back to the point of CalVal, I think those super site is a very good idea. We started this many years ago, but we didn't have the funding to make it so nice and so big. And I think there were some work in the past that already struggled the problem of bright and dark area. We used to have agriculture net on a bright area with different densities, and at the same spot we have variety of grayscale. So I think, I mean, those super site needs to actually go back and see what have been done in the past and implement this into the super site. So there are many things happened, but still don't try to invent the wheel from scratch.
Yes.
Yes, I was also in the CalVal, and if there was all these discussions we're taking, and probably we can go in more detail. But the question I have is basically connecting the three different topics, because I mean, open science means that you give the source code and you give the data in an open platform. Actually, this problem is something we are facing right now in Flex. This is why I mentioned that there will be an exploitation platform where people will get the data available in an open way, all the data, all the validation data which is available from the CalVal sites, and all the source code for the algorithm and everything. So this will happen, let's say, maybe not for all the missions, but some of the missions which are coming have already in mind this open science concept and will be implemented. And how exactly the details, okay, maybe this will be different for different missions, but this concept that people will get access to the data, to the CalVal elements, and to the source code, and will be able to change the source code and introduce new algorithms or process the data in a different way, will be there. Now, the question is that this is somehow incompatible with the second bullet, because if everybody is able to change everything, And open science means that you can do whatever you want with the data in a fully open way, which is okay. Then the harmonization and the standardization is an issue. And this idea that everybody should do the same and we should understand what someone is doing. So this is connecting the third bullet with the second one, and automatically this also connects to the first one, because then the validation of the different product, when they are produced in a systematic way, everywhere the same for all the places, is okay. But if everybody, because open science, is able to develop their own algorithm in every place, how the calibration validation can be guaranteed for all these new things. And I think we are facing this problem in the future, because so far people doing Calval, okay, it's Calval. People doing the second algorithm is okay. The third bullet is okay by itself. But when you put the three pieces together, is how to guarantee open science, fully open science, still harmonizing the product, and still being able to guarantee that there is a full, well-characterized Calval activity for all these products. I think this is one of the challenges we will have.
Maybe just a further thought on that. If now any system is providing its own tools and its own data, this will confuse a non-specialist end user in the end, because they don't know anymore what they're getting from all these tools. There's a real bunch of tools available, but which one to choose, which one to go with. So this needs to be organized somehow, but I don't know how yet. But I guess if now the new, with SPG and CHIME, you're on the right track to coordinate at least these two systems to have a common agreement, what are standard products and so on. And this might help an end user to get an orientation of what's happening and what's really useful for them. But it's quite a high risk on this.
Just to add to that, in the session, the breakout session on product and instrument agnostic algorithms, I think it was quite clear that this broad request for tools was also accompanied by a request that these tools are agreed and, let's say, multilaterally, perhaps even developed and agreed as a standard tool for producing any of these, what we could call homogenized products, or let's say further step than the baseline harmonization of data formats, of physical quantities, of ancillary metadata that we're already pursuing very strongly for CHIME and SPG, but preserving, let's say, the integrity of the separate measurements. So I think I resonate very. I hope this resonates with what you're saying, Daniel.
Yeah, I wanted to answer something to José. Yesterday in the group harmonization and agnostic algorithms, we discussed a lot the fact that there are maybe different user groups. And maybe each time we say the users, actually the users doesn't mean users, the same definition for everyone. So actually, if you think about it, we are not users, we are the remote sensing specialists. The users are the ones at the end of the line, one was harmonized product. And it's almost like with the subject of open science also, there are two mandates. I think the space agencies have a mandate or requirement currently to do open science, so that the people know they have the most accurate product. It's preserve the fidelity, was said a lot. And with those open science algorithms, they know where the data come from. But then there is the other end users who are the ones who will want those products resampled, stacked, I mean, whatever, some actually manipulated data. Although kind of maybe with the same information, maybe not, we don't know at this stage, but it's different users. And the path was how do we go from path one, so the accurate let's say, well-preserved data from accurate calibration validation, etc., to those stacked analysis-ready data that are already manipulated and that are actually what the users want. The users, we want those stacked manipulated data for the time series, for the thematic analysis, for, let's say, the hot societal topics right now. The users wants those manipulated data. And right now, I don't see, I don't know, there will be, I don't know, will there be other platforms with those manipulated data? I don't know.
And I would like to add to this, maybe we should also not forget the users that are using our products, continental products, or maybe global products, which are, again, another user community. And we had in this last session a little bit of discussion about these users. So what are the means to publish our data, to make our data, the communities known about our data, or about our capabilities to measure system processes. So it's really something we also have to think about. What can we do to approach those users? I'm thinking of, for instance, biodiversity. It's, we have discussed in this session a little bit about biodiversity community, but there's so big differences between their understanding about measuring biodiversity and our products. So that there's so much to do. And if we go for global products or continental, we have to do also, and we have to think about how to approach those communities, to involve them, to communicate.
I would like to raise another point on that could fit with the calibration and algorithm, so session 1 and 2, about radiative transfer modeling for hyperspectral and the computing time. So for multispectral bands or radiative transfer models, whatever they are about land or over ocean or whatever, they could match, calculation could be made quite quickly. But now for hyperspectral data, it's quite a challenging task to perform some radiative transfer modeling for full conditions in a reasonable time. So I think maybe some efforts should be made in the future to continue or to find solutions to increase the computing time of radiative transfer model for hyperspectral data. So anybody could use it in an efficient way, because now it's up to the role to the radiative transfer modelers to find some solutions. But sometimes it's a limiting factor for people, for users to, so I think it could match with vicarious calibration and with agnostic algorithms.
Maybe another comment related to this idea of getting more communities involved. I think one of the aspects that has been discussed in this uncertainty discussion, the uncertainty should not be understood just to provide a value as a metadata that includes some kind of error associated to the product. The uncertainty is also meaning the credibility in the product. For instance, the systematic bias that you would expect from the product. And I think this is important because when we talk about providing uncertainties, is also meaning a way to convince the community about the credibility of the product. And I think this is essential to get access to the end users, particularly the biodiversity community or carbon modelers or global climate change or other kind of end users. I think this is the core of this discussion about the uncertainty. Sometimes people believe that uncertainty means that you put an error bar, but it's something more than that. It's really making a stamp or the credibility on the product and then convince the other that we have achieved enough credibility, or lower error, to be used the product for different applications. And then they will know how to use that. Because usually the end user is not completely stupid. They know what they can do with the data. My second comment is about this, how to reach the high-level products. And I think we are putting together level 3 and level 4 as high level beyond that. But I think there is a very different implication if we are talking about combination of products coming from SVG, CHIME, or other missions, which are pretty much the same product, harmonized, And simply we want to extend the spatial coverage and the temporal coverage, which is a level three kind of temporal and spatial mosaicing, where I think we are already there and we can make a lot of progress for level 3. And then for level 4 is another story, because level 4 is one step beyond, and then we had to involve the users, and we had to involve probably additional data beyond the imaging spectroscopy data. So I think it would be a mistake to address level 3 and level 4 altogether as something beyond level 2. Probably we had to split these two strategies, because for one, it's a very clear, straightforward way to achieve what we really want to achieve, which is this multi-temporal mosaicing, continental mosaicing and things like that, which is level 3 kind of approaches. For level 4, we need to think more carefully, and probably the solution will be completely different if we are talking about climate modelers, or we are talking about biodiversity, or we are talking about agriculture, something we need to think more. And also, considering that at this step, probably imaging spectroscopy alone will not solve the problem. So at this step, we really need to consider how to merge the data with other data in order to really achieve the final application.
I just wanted to further to react to the need to improve the performance of relative transfer models when used for hyperspectral workflows. From a developer's perspective, it's a very hard goal to achieve because everyone wants everything. And so I think also another thing that is missing in that area is a clearer scoping of what each relative transfer model can do, because you always have to make trade-offs when you develop one of these things. Either you want something extremely accurate that will, I don't know, generate a big image with a lot of detail, and so then the added complexity in the scene results in extended computational time, which makes it hard to use for real-time applications, or you need to make compromise on the precision and accuracy you're going to have so that you can make it faster. And I don't, I think it's not something that is always in the mind of the people who are going to use these tools, that if they use one, they will have something fast but lower accuracy. And if they use another one, they will have something more accurate, but it's going to be more costly. Yeah, that was just a comment. So I don't know if this is about educating more end users about relative transfer models in general. If it's on the other hand on the let's say agencies and overarching sort of authorities to try and assess user needs to say, okay, so we need 3 types of models and we need to support and promote these 3 different categories. I don't know, I don't have an answer to this, but I think it's important to keep in mind that not all of them are equivalent and each of them have very specific use cases actually.
Yes. Then.
I would just like shortly comment on that. I think that there is specifically when it comes to coupling radiative transfer of the land surface and the atmosphere, these are really quite 2 different domains. We have models for atmosphere, for land surface, and they can be coupled in as we want. But to pile on this, I think we need to build one community of so-called super users, because at this moment the radiative transfer model programmers are actually acting as well as the supporters and so on. They have a very high load to get the community, understand the model and so on. And we need people who understand how the models work perfectly and can help the others. Basically, it's an intermediate community between the programming radiative transfer model and using, and so super user layer is not existing.
Yeah, yesterday I joined a
the breakout group product harmonization, and I was wondering if we also need process harmonization. So thinking in the way of Google Earth Engine, where we have all the data in one place, we have all the data management, the query engine in place, and the end user just can focus on their algorithms. But of course, Earth Engine is a closed system. If I want to have my own algorithm, I need to go to JavaScript, I guess it was, or Java. So that's not optimal. But the flexibility that Earth Engine is presenting is a very nice model, I guess. And if NASA and ESA could have a joint effort to providing to users such a platform with more flexibility, and of course, I guess users then have to pay for infrastructural costs of processing stuff and so on. But this is, I guess, something that's missing. We're not really harmonizing our processing efforts.
Oh, yeah, also Jean-Baptiste had a point. On
Okay.
that, I think. Kelly, yes.
Hi. I wanted to take a moment to just kind of return to some of the aquatic topics that were raised. And I wasn't in the calibration or validation section or product harmonization, but I think when it comes to thinking about aquatic reflectance across missions, how that's defined and how atmospheric correction, land surface atmospheric modeling, there are details in those upper level processes that when we get to higher level, when we think about handing that over to an end user or a user, a lot of them still have to go back to figure out, is this appropriate for my type of aquatic scene? Did they have the same land mass, like easy, really base questions that documentation isn't necessarily there, or even just a consistent messaging on how we're treating a water pixel versus an adjacent land one. And I think really more conversations about consistency in aquatic pixels. And then as well, that will hopefully come out of these types of conversations about how we do the calibration and validation around that, and then how that leads up into higher level products. But I think, yeah, there's multiple messages, and I think you see it in NASA as well. You can have remote sensing reflectance, you can have aquatic reflectance from a different agency. Even at SVG, those definitions still need more clarity.
For me, data sharing is the most important thing, and I don't have the solution, but how can we share the data that we are collecting in ground truth, for instance? I don't know, despite of using this publisher that are obliged that you will provide the data, many ground truth measurements have been done by us. Is there any system that we can share this data? Because the data is sometimes under IP. We have solution in the soil spectroscopy group, but I don't know how people think about doing it in this community. So if there are some ideas, I would be very happy to hear.
Jean-Baptiste, I think, had a point.
Thank you. So to get back to what you said, and also maybe to link with Eyal's comment. So I think, we had this discussion in the open science group, and so one key would be to share a standard in terms of like data format. So you mentioned Google Earth Engine. Actually, now we have other possibilities which are not centralized this way. So you discussed also about centralization, and we came out with the idea that we should not centralize data. We should use standards, and then we should be able to basically communicate with and request from different types of catalogs. So there's one standard which is Stack, which is currently used by Sentinel-2 users, Landsat users, and others. Some people here so Phil Broderick told me he was participant for the definition of the Stack standard, so there may be also possibilities to get a Stack extension so that we could
basically use the same standard to access catalogs from Sentinel, Landsat data, other missions like hyperspectral missions. And there may also be a way to use that kind of spatiotemporal queries to also get access to ground data. So this is, well, maybe the next step. So yeah, there are a bunch of things coming up, but GUI-Earth Engine may not be the solution at some point because it's too centralized, and as you said, you are captive of a system. But we now have a bunch of free open tools which allow us to build infrastructures which could be really efficient for us. And then another next step is to actually adopt our software development practice in order to really take advantage of all these cloud resources and make sure that we can, well, as researchers and like method developments, we don't spend time on building the pipelines, and we just focus on the method, and then we can apply them efficiently at any scale we want.
So I just would like to mention that I remember very clearly at the end of the workshop in 2022, this aspect of training was very, very strongly, let's say, highlighted. And I have two questions. What do you think is still missing, and is what is available today already, and I think about the MOOCs, I think about all the trainings that we've seen also, let's say, used, the training material which we've seen used, or some of us have seen used during the training that we've had on Tuesday afternoon on EMIT, Nmap, and Prisma data access and usage. So are these tools already sufficiently advertised and used to the full potential? Yes, no. And if there is something still missing that we have to push and do better in the coming years, what is that? What is that, in your opinion, that is still missing in the panorama of available tools, tutorials, massive online courses?
Maybe a comment directly to that, because we had that discussion also yesterday, and I remember somebody said that it would be nice to have one platform for the education, because it's hard to know what's all around there, and then to have like one centralized platform to find these.
So besides the platform, the point is we should be better in communicating the existence and availability of this.
But maybe a comment here. I think for the platform and the summary of the education part, we are already one step ahead. I mean, the EO College platform consists already of a wide range. Also from ESA side, I think the funding is there yet. So I think we're going in the right direction. But of course, I think also the fact that every new user of hyperspectral data who enters this community needs some kind of training, and that will just increase over the next couple of years. And I think this is a main point, but because we will not have anyone entering this community, we had some new people here because we opened the workshop who just start with this data, and they will come up in the next years more and more and need to underlie this training. Otherwise, they get lost really easy.
I was just going to say that one of the things that I think that we could maybe even do is, rather than centralizing, do more cross-posting. I send students to the Nmap resources all the time because they're awesome. And so we could do more of, linking to that on like the resources page for EMIT, for example, to help people like find all like different resources that help them at these different scales. And NEON has a lot of tools for airborne activities, and we could do better hosting some of that on the Avarice site, for example, but maybe just kind of trying to crosswalk some of those things too. So wherever people happen to end up, they can find a broader set of resources.
I think it's great we talk about the educational tools.
What I observe is sometimes we focus when we have meetings like this meeting happens, this workshop happens every 2 years, right? But it's up to us to basically, every opportunity we get, right, to make that frequently reminded and available. I agree with you that there are new people coming in line and the training is very important to make this available. So let's make it more frequent, whether we do it on a webcast or whatever it is, right? We don't all have to get into one place to do these kind of trainings, but we do it on a regular basis instead of just having it every 2 years or every conference that only happens on an annual basis. So I think the frequency is needed to be increased.
Hello? Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. So also for a part of that, I mean, for the vicarious, also I know that most of the missions in the commissioning phase, also they develop some validation activities more of the time, also in overpasses with other sensors. Could also be a good idea to share this maybe in a common format in a way, I don't know, with has been some suggestions of EOPFS or something similar like that, so that everybody can download and doesn't have many readers to read each of the formats of each validation campaign. And also to trace that, maybe not to host the data, but at least some kind of table or database from the ESA or NASA or main agencies to say, or CEOs, where this data can, or the person or the contact person where everybody can access, and if they have these overpasses with, I mean, for example, Sentinel or other missions.
I fully support the idea of getting education tutorial during the time we have till the next meeting, and I think this has to be somehow funded, or at least some funded project. And for this idea, I think we should consider maybe submit cost action process and do that.
Have you considered hackathons?
Sorry?
Hackathons? So just as a way to get the word out and for actually people to start picking up on the data as a seed from where things could sprout somehow?
Personally, not in my ESA life, but earlier I look at Javier there. Yes, it's I think it's an interesting approach. You have to find the right challenge for a hackathon. So maybe we should think about the challenge, and then we can together, and then we can set up something which is engaging for a large user community, and yeah, why not?
Before we were mentioning to have regular and updated meeting and workshop, and a colleague was mentioning to have a conference. I totally agree, but I really appreciate ESEN as an effort to not reinventing the wheel, to join the effort in a common things. So we should either know that there are already other conference specific on hyperspectral, like the Whisper of the IEEE, and we have also here in Europe the RCL SIG on spectroscopy. So I'm saying that I'm fully positive on this direction. So making again this community more compact and try to see if there is potential synergy with both of those two, or in some way having ones that become the one of the reference of the community. Otherwise, you know, time is the more difficult things, and I think that we risk to dissipate our energy on different directions. So this is a nice community. They invited Bobo next time in the US, so it's something to keep it together in the direction also that of the new community will increase a lot. So it's nice to be the reference for the education, for the way how data have to be handled, where they are, and instead of disperse energy to really focus and be on the same path and all together.
I see a lot of thumbs up and for that, and I just want to add another small element, which quoting Jeff Dozier from 2022 again. Sorry to try to make this bridge, but I think it's interesting, at least for me, to see how discussions are evolving. And at the time, he said, like, I'm always suspicious when there is that much agreement in people talking in this, but that's not the case. I'm joking, but just to certainly not the suspicion, at least. The thing is, I'm personally not concerned about the plurality of products and approaches that the community will express. I think if the spirit in which we're doing not just this workshop, but really our continuous work with NASA, with ASI, with DLR, is to create exactly a sort of baseline on which to facilitate the use, exploitation, uptake of these products, in order, again, to meet the requirements, for example, in terms of frequency of observations, which are expressed by the community, and that we see then when we have time series, and so consistent time series, incredible things start to happen. So we are seeing that for the first time. I was impressed by some of the presentations, and I think this is the future for which we really have to prepare at a global scale. So this is a need and also I think an effort that we are willing to undertake without trying to constrain the plurality of products and approaches which may arise afterwards. But at least we have a starting baseline, which I think is important. Okay, I think we are getting closer to the acknowledgements, and I would just take the chance for a round of final comments, starting from the stage. Yes.
Yes, Marco, thank you. Now, I was thinking to your last comment you just did, because in viewing of exploiting all the biophysical parameters that we are going to see increased mapping in time and global scale, I'm also thinking the comment of Kili to try to now look at the Earth as a continuum ecosystem. So we do have lakes, river, water, forestry, snow, and all of these things merged. So I think that such kind of sensor, which brings remote sensing expert in imaging spectroscopy, but each one of us is more close to soil application, terrestrial vegetation, aquatic water quality, has the opportunity now to cross-check the expertise we do have on single ecosystems, because at the end, the Earth is a continuum landscape. And as it's happening with multispectral data, in which now we do try to combine how the land use, land cover may affect the coastal waters, biogeochemical properties, I do see here a lot of potential, because HYPERSPECTRAL really covers nice biophysical variable across a continuum landscape. So I do expect in the years to come, cross-thematic application will be strongly supported by these missions. So this is my last comment. And yes, I take this opportunity to acknowledge the organizer, all the participants. Has been great. I had the privilege to attend this synergic workshop since the beginning. in my home country, in Italy. So glad to see this evolving also across the Europe and then maybe in a couple of years in the States. And I just take a last comment from one of the people who will hope to see this community engaged larger also for other continents which are less represented nowadays. So thank you very much.
Yeah, for me, I think I enjoyed a lot of the conversation. I don't really have a final comment. What I see also, I was also part of the lucky ones who are third time in this conference, so like kind of a HYPERSPECTRAL family. And me, what I see as an evolution is that more and more countries are represented. Of course, the whole opening of NASA, ESA, like lots of people from the state, of course, but also in general, more and more countries represented. We see it in the user of our hyperspectral missions is really getting very widely distributed around the whole world, actually. So people are using a lot, this map we have seen from India, South America, Asia, of course. So this is really not a Europe NASA thing, it's actually much more global than that. And I think in the future, this will be what we will see. Maybe more user communities or more developments towards the users, basically. And also personal thanks for everyone. First, I enjoyed a lot this conversation. And it was very lively, so it was very nice, lots of good inputs. I will remember 2 or 3 points that I liked a lot, like the hackathon or the process platform. Let's see. And yeah, thanks to Marco and Ank, especially, and to my colleagues here. Thank you.
Okay, take-home message, many written down in the book. But for me, one point that was raised in the different discussion groups, also this morning in the session, basically the definition of the user. We always say user or user community. We do not differentiate, we did not group them properly yet. I assume many of the potential users are not in this room yet, and they're not even aware of the workshop yet. So for me, I'm very much looking forward to meet them all, and hopefully also you again in the future.
Jens?
Don't want to push you away. Huh? No. Sorry. It has a lot of interferences, this microphone. Sorry for those I gave it in the hand. So thanks a lot. I think it was incredible, nice organization by Anko and Marcos to put the third workshop here in place. We did it in 2019 with Mike Rust. I think Mike we need also to mention today. So it's for sure as the one who, let's say, had the lightning idea to put this in place. And just maybe also to reflect a bit back at the time when we were establishing in 2019 this workshop, everything was very vague. We had the idea, there were a couple of missions to come, and today the situation looks different. When we looked at the first session we were sharing, Rob, I mean, we talk about hundreds of satellites up. It doesn't mean that hundreds of satellites will provide the revisit time we are expecting, because we saw the revisit time we are expecting is in the range of weeks or weekly. What means that these hundreds of satellites will not provide the weekly revisit time. However, we are going into this direction, and with the reduction of launch cost, when we talk about $500 or euro per kilo, we have an idea in which direction this will go. So the idea behind this is that we are spreading this workshop out in the ways of collaborating, and I very highly appreciate that it goes now out of Europe, where we are bringing basically, and this was a task we had in 2019, we wanted to bring, let's say, the Prisma and Nmap community together, because it was at that time still a bit divided. I think we managed. I see, yeah, okay, sorry. And we are enlarging this further, and I think it works very well from that perspective. Then another element I want to say is a big thank you from the project team. So I'm the project manager of CHYME, but also Antonio, I see Kevin, Valentina has already gone, so the core members of the team. It gives us a lot to be present in these kind of workshops. It gives us a lot of motivation to do our job proper in a right manner, and also to deliver what we are receiving here as an feedback. Also to say that we had ACRI and OHB here, our industrial team. I think they're already gone, but maybe they're listening. They have posters here, so also this engagement is important. And also the workshop, the NMAP workshop, in case, and I make some advertisement for the NMAP workshop in April. So in case you join the NMAP workshop, you have also the chance to go to visit OHB and see parts of the instrument already established. We have the engineering functional model running. We have the SDMs and these kind of things. I'm talking too long? No. I don't have to bridge time here. So no, I think another point I wanted to bring up, because I heard this from Patrick and also from others. The problem we are facing here is not the problem we were facing at the time of Landsat and Sentinel-2. It's a different problem, it's more complex. And we need solutions which are different. The solution cannot be a harmonized product, it cannot be a standardized product, and it cannot be a product which is essentially on all sides the same. And we are working on this. Antonio is in charge on our side to produce a large table where we go through all the elements, all the variables we have for each of the level 1 products to be established, to be announced. What is behind this? Talking about DMs, talking about uncertainties. But we also have to think about the spectral response function. We have to build, and we call this industry, we call this an interface protocol, and we have to exchange these kind of interface protocols not only between the agencies, what we did, we have to do this also with the newcomers, with the hundreds of satellites coming up there. When we want to make use of the data, we need the interface. And once we have the interface, we can take our module and apply it, and the data will be swallowed in the way we did it in the past. I think this is a solution which will come, and not the solution that some agency or a big pot of money is used in order to produce a global harmonized product. We are not able to we don't have the finances anymore for this. Okay, I think I close with this, and want to thank you very much for this very interesting workshop.
Thank you, Jens.
All right, I guess I want to echo Anka's comment about the users. A question was asked to me maybe 2 years ago in the greenhouse gas regime. What does success look like? What would we say this process, these workshops what would we say was successful? And for me, I think it's the users. Do we have people using products from our observations to answer important questions for new science that in this changing planet that we can with the spectroscopic observations, and new applications for the applied users? So I think you're absolutely right. We want to be reaching out to those communities, encourage them to use the precursor data sets, NMAP, PRISMA, Airborne, and testing those hypotheses. But in the limit, when both SPG and CHYME are flying, if people are using those data to answer the important questions, whether they're applied or new science, feeding Earth system models so they're more accurate, that's what success would look like. So I think we want to think about, and I'm open to other ideas for success, but that's my idea of what I think success would look like from this process and the journey we've been on for longer than I care to mention at this point. All right, but again, I would definitely want to thank Anka and Marco and everyone who's organized this most extraordinary workshop. Thank you.
So it's time for for some acknowledgements also on our end, and it was, to be honest, not just a pleasure, but also a very rewarding experience. At least I speak for myself. Challenging at times, of course, as everything. You have to put some energy into that. But I'm extremely happy, and I think I speak for both of us. Of how it came together in the end. And this is thanks to many people. We have acknowledged already the organizing and scientific committee. We want to really start a round of applause for all the people in the background who supported a lot, for Claudia, Francesca, Jasmine, Sharon, Theo, Keith, who run the whole show behind, and also a very special one for Sabrina and Fabrizio, who really were instrumental. So please. Very nice. I mean, because the chairs were fantastic in keeping the time, the speakers were fantastic in keeping the time, but there was zero lag in moving from one presentation to the other, thanks to this two in the back. So thank you very much. Just some pictures from the last days. We've had an extraordinary amount of great talks, so I want to thank really wholeheartedly all the speakers, and it's been fantastic also to have this breakout session. I believe very useful. We will probably keep that and perhaps even reinforce that. I apologize if we had some issues with the buses at times. We will work on that. But most of all, I really want to thank you all for joining, because we can organize the best possible location ever, the best possible dinner ever, the best possible event, but without you joining and contributing to the presentation, to the discussion, to the organization, it's made for nothing. So thank you very much, very much.
I can only say thank you all for never being tired to discuss. And I think this is what made this workshop so lively. Thank you.
Okay, so for those of you who want to join us for a last lunch at the Esta canteen, we're going to head there. And if you need to reserve the shuttle from the reception, we will try to pass by the reception on our way to the canteen. So if not, wish you wonderful and safe travel back home, and a wonderful weekend ahead. Thank you again.